Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. World War III alert. We got a World War III alert. Zelensky in hiding as Putin blows up all of the hiding spots. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform. Y'all. Well, see, this is why Trump told NATO to get out of Ukraine. Take all of their soldiers and get out of Ukraine because he already knew what was coming. And it's going to till they find Zelensky.
An engineering plant called Bolshevik in Kiev has targeted with a pinpoint strike and destroyed it after the arrival of missiles, which allegedly did not survive from Moscow's direct message. Viral videos on the internet, released by Russian military channels on June 7, 2025, confirm that a massive Russian execution took place there, hitting Bolshevik plant, a building and substructures and basements on the edge of the plant, located right in the heart of the capital, which the Kiev regime using for the production of weapons and storage of ammunition. However, there is no deep and secret hiding place from the Russian eyes, because Bolshevik plant is a relic of the Soviet era. The most interesting aspect of this strike is the large secondary explosion early in the morning on June 7th, which occurred a few hours after the official attack ended, and the air raid warning had been lifted in the Kiev region. As can be seen in the video, the second explosion came from under the ground floor on the area of the former Bolshevik plant and is equivalent to something the size of JDAM. The fire continued to burn, and no one came there. According to sources, there was a fortified bunker under the territory of the plant, which is using to store ammunition. It was also destroyed. The bunker, like the Azovstal plant, was built to survive a nuclear attack, and reports say that a high-ranking Ukrainian figure is in a Cold War-era underground bunker beneath the site.
Oh, yeah.
Additionally,
high-ranking Ukrainian figure. Who could it be, y'all? Knock, knock. Is Zelensky home? Who the hell is high? See, first of all, Russia built all of these nuclear bunkers when the Soviet Union controlled Ukraine. You think you're gonna be hiding there? So that's how cold Putin is. Who chess master? He leave a rat somewhere to run to. They think they can hide out there, then they blow that up too.
Another new angle that was just uploaded shows the extent of the damage to the structure behind it, where the weapons factory now sits right in the middle of a residential area. Most likely civilian deaths made the headlines, while Kiev...
That's a war crime. Not what Russia did, what Ukraine did. You're not supposed to be having these military facilities near civilians. What are you doing, Zelensky? You thought that was going to save you?
Was busy playing the victim, the report wrote. It seems that Russian patience is running out. Moscow has closed the page on peace and opened the gates of hell on the regime.
We told them, boy, piece of that. Oh, but they doing it's all over Ukraine. Look like they scared to death. Look, trying to hide in the boy, man. Who we want to know who dead? Who is that other there? Who was the high-ranking Ukrainian official? Is the head of the military? Was it NATO? Probably so. A couple of NATO generals, captains, lieutenants. Let's hear from Trump real quick because I got so much more footage. More bunkers with here. Hold on, let's hear from Trump. These people, they real mad at Trump too on TV, y'all. They say he's siding with Putin. And all Trump did was let Putin know it wasn't me, it was them, and he got out the way. Let's hear from Trump.
To go in and bomb the hell out of them after Sunday's massive attack on air bases deep inside Russian territory.
Well, they gave Putin a reason to go in and bomb the hell out of him last night. That's what I didn't like about it. When I saw it, I said, here we go. Now it's going to be a strike.
That's when Zelensky started hiding in the bunker. Once he heard Trump say that, he knew Trump had stabbed him in the back. Well, they gave Putin a reason to bomb the hell out of him. Oh, it's over then. The U.S. just said, y'all deserve everything you finna get. What the hell you thought Putin was going to do? And I told y'all, laugh, not cry later. These people was just on the news talking all that shit about what they had did to Russia. Okay, cool. Cool. Now it's Russia time. That's all you had planned? We're gonna watch a lot of terror in Ukraine right now. And the fact that Russia hunted that Patriot missile system, that has all of NATO scared to death. You wanna know why? Because that's what NATO has as their air defense. Patriot missile systems. Germany, Britain, they all want Patriots. Russia saying, I don't know what for. We're gonna get it too soon.
In a major escalation of precision strikes deep inside Ukrainian territory, a heavily fortified underground bunker in the city of Lutsk has reportedly been obliterated.
You know what I'm saying? That's another. I told you, knock, knock. They looking for Zelensky now. They going from one spot to another, hitting underground bunkers. Where you hiding, Zelensky? Then it's rack. They try to run somewhere else. They hit that too. Hey, there ain't too many places you're gonna be hiding. They're gonna hit all of them places.
Destroying a significant cache of Western-supplied missiles, according to military sources familiar with the situation. The bunker, located on the outskirts of the northwestern city, is believed to have housed 56 British-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles, 32 US-made Patriot air defense missiles, and 53 ATACMS tactical ballistic missiles, making it one of the most densely packed and strategically valuable storage facilities in Ukraine's arsenal.
Well, it was.
According to reports,
valuable NATO. That's NATO weapons. That's NATO weapons. They plan to hit. See, they've been talking all this shit about firing them weapons into Russia. Well, not anymore. They got blown up with whoever was hiding out in them bunkers when Russia came knocking on the door.
The strike occurred late Monday night, with satellite images and seismic activity suggesting a deep penetration munition may have been used to compromise the hardened facility, while Ukrainian officials have yet to confirm the loss. Russian sources immediately claimed responsibility, calling it a crippling blow to Kyiv's long-range strike capabilities. If verified, the destruction of the cache would mark one of the most significant single losses of NATO-supplied munitions since the start of the war. Storm Shadow cruise missiles have played a pivotal role in Ukraine's precision strikes against command centers and logistics hubs in Crimea and the Donbass. The Patriot missiles have been a key component of Kyiv's layered air defense network, especially in shielding major urban centers from Russian missile and drone attacks. The ATACMS, meanwhile, have been instrumental in disrupting Russian supply lines and troop concentrations in occupied territory. A sweeping overnight missile and drone assault by Russian forces overwhelmed Ukraine's air defenses, exposing the vulnerability of US-supplied Patriot systems as key infrastructure across Kyiv and Western Ukraine was decimated.
Come on now. Come on, you U.S. want to act like they ain't in it now. What? They give them your weapons and your intelligence, your CIA and all kind of different NATO troops is over there. Now they act like it's just Ukraine. What? This is very humiliating, but this is what they get. I want to see them on TV talking about the Patriot missile system again. I want to see Zelensky say we need more Patriots. For what? Why are you getting our shit blown up, Zelensky? We might well get it blown up ourselves fighting. What are you doing it for? This is very humiliating. Trump should have came in, got the peace deal, and they could have saved some face. Putin tried to help him save face, but now total humiliation.
The attack, one of the most expansive to date, reportedly involved a mix of modified Geran drones, Gerberas, Caliber cruise missiles, and Iskander MKN-23 ballistic missiles, many launched from Tu-95MS strategic bombers. Despite being on high alert, Ukraine's Patriot batteries stationed near Kiev.
That Iskander missile is legendary now. It's terrorizing these people, bro. Hypersonic missile. It changed directions. They can make it change directions in mid-flight. So whenever you shoot at it, it can go the opposite way. And then attack your ass.
Failed to intercept several of the incoming warheads. The capital was rocked by multiple direct hits, igniting large fires and inflicting visible structural damage across the city.
It's reality, bro.
According to Ukrainian military officials who spoke on background, the Patriot systems were overloaded by the sheer volume and simultaneous arrival of projectiles. They just couldn't keep up. One senior officer admitted it was a saturation strike, and unfortunately, it worked. The result was a grim trail of destruction. Gas stations exploded in flames, the city's metro system was crippled, and railway connections were partially disabled. The capital's largest thermal power plant, TPP-5, and the Darnitsia thermal power plant, TPP-4, was struck, leaving large swaths of the city in blackout condition. In one of the most intense aerial assaults on Ukraine's capital in recent months, Russia launched a barrage of missiles and kamikaze drones on Kyiv overnight, leaving 4 dead and at least 20 wounded, including 16 hospitalized, city officials said.
All kind of NATO and Ukraine troops died.
The Ukrainian Air Force reported that the capital was targeted with Iranian-made Shahed drones and Caliber cruise missiles. A series of large explosions rocked the city throughout the night, powerful enough to shatter windows and ignite fires in multiple residential buildings. The attack followed a high-level phone call between Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump, during which Putin vowed retaliation for Ukraine's drone strike last week on Russian bomber bases. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko confirmed the deaths and ongoing search and rescue operations across several districts. The city's metro system suffered significant disruption after a missile damaged a train between 2 stations. According to the city's military administration, train services between Darnitsia and Livoberezhny stations were suspended due to damage to tracks and cables. Repairs are expected to take up to 24 hours. Fires were reported in Solomyansky, Holosivsky, Darnitsky, Dniprovsky, and Shevchenkivsky districts. In the Solomyansky district, a drone hit the 11th floor of a 16-story apartment block, setting it ablaze. 3 people were rescued from the building before emergency crews extinguished the flames. In Holosivsky, falling debris damaged a residential building and a nearby educational institution. A gas station in the Dniprovsky district suffered significant damage, officials said, and several vehicles were struck by drone wreckage. Another blaze broke out on the 17th floor of a high-rise building in Darnitsky district, where medics were dispatched to treat victims. Ukraine's largest private energy company, DTEK, reported that over 2,000 households on the city's left bank were left without electricity due to the strikes. The Russian offensive extended beyond Kyiv, with explosions also reported in Ternopil, Khmelnytsky, Lviv, and Lutsk, suggesting a broader strategy to cripple Ukraine's energy and transportation infrastructure. Air raid alerts were issued nationwide as Ukrainian authorities warned of further incoming missiles launched by Russian Tu-95MS strategic bombers. The overnight bombardment follows a dramatic Ukrainian drone operation that reportedly destroyed several of Russia's strategic bomber aircraft at an airfield. Continues to push for international support and air defense reinforcements, the Russian attacks are a grim reminder of the war's intensifying front beyond the battlefield, increasingly affecting civilians deep inside Ukraine's urban
Surrender.
centers.
Surrender, Zelensky. This all stopped the day Zelensky surrendered. Won't be no more bombs, no more shootings, no more bunkers blowing up. But until the end, there's nobody that can help him, you know. So that's why Zelensky is like a mole. He got to sleep underground now. He don't even he a green screen when you see him above ground. That man stay underground now. Now that he know the Patriot missile system is no good, he got to live underground.
What happens when your most trusted shield suddenly cracks? For over a year, Ukraine has relied on the US-made Patriot missile system to defend its skies from Russia's relentless bombardment. And until recently, it worked. But something has changed. Russia's latest missile upgrades, specifically to the Iskander-M, with radar decoys and unpredictable flight paths, they're slipping past Patriots and hitting critical targets.
You have plenty smart, intelligent military experts warning the U.S., giving Ukraine, lending Ukraine, fighting with Ukraine in Ukraine as mercenaries, using the U.S. most advanced weapons was a big mistake because Russia will learn how to outsmart them, outmaneuver them, destroy them, build their weapons to defeat your weapons. So when you fight Russia, you're just going to get manhandled real rough. And they're proving it right now. The Patriot missile system is one of the U.S. most advanced missile systems. They send this everywhere. This is their missile system that they sell to the world. I know they stock done dropped. It's barely not, because they're not showing this on TV. They don't want to talk about this. Nobody gonna buy that shit no more.
So, is Ukraine's air defense system failing? Or has the game of missile warfare just evolved? Let's set the stage. Since Russia launched its full-scale invasion, Ukraine has depended on Western weapons to survive. The Patriot missile system was one of the most high-profile additions, praised as a technological leap in missile defense. It's equipped with advanced radar. It uses hit-to-kill technology, meaning no explosive warhead, just raw kinetic energy slamming into the incoming missile. And it has worked. Patriots have intercepted drones, cruise missiles, and even hypersonic threats.
That's a lie. They ain't intercepting no damn.
But that was before Russia rewrote the playbook. Because now, Ukraine's Air Force admits the latest Iskander-Ms are different. Much different. The Iskander-M has long been a central weapon in Russia's tactical missile arsenal. But in 2024, Ukrainian and Western intelligence agencies confirmed that Russia had rolled out an upgraded version of the missile, one equipped with two devastating enhancements that fundamentally alter the game. First, these new Iskander-Ms can perform mid-flight maneuvers. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow a predictable parabolic arc, the upgraded variants can twist and shift their trajectory as they soar toward their target. This makes them significantly harder to track, to anticipate, and, most importantly, to intercept. For missile defense systems like the Patriot, which rely on calculating precise interception points, this erratic behavior poses a serious challenge. Even more dangerous, however, is the missile's use of radar decoys. In the final seconds before impact, just as defensive systems are preparing to engage, these decoys mimic the radar signature of the actual warhead, creating the illusion of multiple incoming threats. To a Patriot battery operator, it may look like 5 or 6 missiles are approaching simultaneously. Faced with this high-stakes deception, operators must make a split-second decision. Which one is real? It's a deadly guessing game, and the consequences of getting it wrong are catastrophic. If even one decoy fools the system, the real missile can slip through and strike its target. This isn't just theoretical, it has already happened. On April 6, 2025, during a significant Russian missile assault on Kyiv, Ukraine's air defenses, including Patriot systems, were unable to stop every Iskander. Some missiles broke through, causing damage to the Ukraine side. The event highlighted not just the vulnerability of Ukraine's defense grid, but also raised uncomfortable questions about the limits of Western technology in the face of rapidly evolving threats. And perhaps most critically, it dealt a psychological blow. Confidence in the shield that had once seemed so secure was now shaken. So what does all this mean? Not just tactically on the battlefield, but strategically in the broader scope of the war. To start, there's the staggering cost of defense. Each PAC-3 interceptor, used by the Patriot system, carries a price tag of over $3 million. In the event of a large-scale missile attack, a single battery might fire dozens of these interceptors in a single night. When those multi-million-dollar missiles are diverted toward radar decoys instead of real warheads, the result is an enormous financial loss and a potential disaster if the actual missile makes it through unchallenged. Then there's the issue of sustainability. Russia's defense industry, still functioning at a high capacity, can afford to replace lost missiles and continue its bombardment. Ukraine, by contrast, is heavily reliant on Western supply lines and financial support. It cannot match Russia's rate of fire or replenish its own interceptor stockpiles at the same speed. This imbalance means that, over time, the pressure will mount, strategically wearing down Ukraine's ability to defend itself. Another critical vulnerability is geographic. Each Patriot battery has a limited operational radius of roughly 30 kilometers. To adequately protect a sprawling city like Kyiv, at least 3 batteries are required. But perhaps the most dangerous consequence isn't physical, it's psychological. Every missile that breaks through the shield strikes a blow to public morale. It shakes the confidence of soldiers on the front lines and of political leaders making urgent appeals for continued Western aid. The emotional toll is real, and it's growing. And there's another layer: political optics. As Western taxpayers and lawmakers see their high-tech, high-cost missile systems repeatedly outmaneuvered, questions start to arise. Why keep funding a defense that isn't working as promised? Military aid, after all, is not just a strategic asset. It's a political investment. If public support erodes due to perceptions of inefficacy, that lifeline could start to fray. In that sense, the battle isn't only on the front lines of Ukraine, it's also being fought in the parliaments and public debates of its allies. But this goes far beyond Ukraine. This is about the future of warfare. If decoy-equipped, maneuvering missiles can defeat top-tier Western defense systems, then every military strategy built on air superiority is at risk. It's no coincidence that NATO and the EU are now rushing to upgrade their own Patriot arsenals. New radar systems, smarter interceptors, better coordination software. The US Army has already tested next-generation Patriot radars that are supposed to distinguish decoys from real threats. But those systems aren't in Ukraine yet, and may not arrive for months. In the meantime, Ukraine is stuck fighting a 2025 war with 2020 technology. And Russia, they're not just testing Ukraine's defenses, they're testing NATO's assumptions about readiness, about superiority, about deterrence. If even the Patriot can be fooled, what system can still protect the sky? Is this the beginning of a new missile age? One where the offense always outpaces the defense? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.
So, tonight, in response to the terrorist attacks of the Kiev regime, the Russian army launched a massive strike with high-precision weapons and attack drones on Ukrainian military-industrial complex enterprises, a flight crew training center, and a weapons and military equipment depot of the Ukrainian army. The Ministry of Defense reported this. The strike's target was achieved. All designated objects were hit. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, 407 drones, 36 H-101 and Caliber cruise missiles, and 8 Iskander missiles were involved in the attack. One of these missiles hit the position of the American Patriot air defense system near Kiev. Attempts to repel the attack with 4 air defense missiles were unsuccessful. In the Ukrainian capital, railway infrastructure and 2 large thermal power plants were hit. This is footage after a missile landed on the territory of the Kiev Bolshevik plant. Eyewitnesses are filming giant tornadoes of black smoke and flame. Explosions thundered almost all over Ukraine. In the west of the country, in Lutsk, 5 H-101 cruise missiles hit the territory of the motor plant. The footage shows that our Russian missiles are confusing the enemy air defense, shooting off heat traps. The most powerful hits were also in Ternopil. The main blow fell on the Vatra plant, which has been working for the needs of the Ukrainian army for 18 years and is included in the list of enterprises of strategic importance for the economy and security of Ukraine. There are also reports of strikes on gas storage facilities and postal terminals, which provide logistics for the Ukrainian army. Details of the attack in our article. Footage of successive massive strikes by Russian missiles is filmed on a phone by a half-asleep resident of Lutsk. This is the Volyn region in western Ukraine. The air defense missed the moment of the attack. H-101 cruise missiles, probably launched from the Caspian Sea, crossed the whole of Ukraine in a dense formation, unhindered, more than 1,500 kilometers. At the final stage of the flight, the missiles release heat traps under the meaningless shots of Ukrainian machine guns. At the same time, there is not a single contrail from the launch of anti-aircraft missiles in the sky. One of the largest military-industrial complex facilities in the country, the motor aircraft plant, was hit, where the Kiev regime repairs Soviet combat aircraft supplied by Poland. In less than 30 seconds, there were 6 powerful missile hits. Russia has also massively attacked the Lviv and Khmelnytsky regions, the city of Lutsk and Chernihiv with Shahid missiles and drones. An industrial facility in the Drahomykivsky district was damaged. Several villages near Lviv have problems with electricity. The city of Chernihiv was also damaged. As a result of the Russian attack, the power supply to pumping stations in the city was disrupted, and there is a water shortage. In the Khmelnytsky region, oil production facilities were attacked, and a military airfield was attacked in Starokostiantynov, where Western F-16 fighters are based. Another flock of sea-based Caliber cruise missiles hit gas storage facilities in Ternopil. they still cannot put out the fire. A black column of smoke several hundred meters high is rising above the city. Residents are asked not to leave their homes. A second strike was carried out at dawn. The capital was also under attack. Our troops struck military facilities in Kiev with ballistic missiles and Garin, 2 attack drones. The most important thermal power plant for Kiev in the military industry, TPP number 5, was attacked. This is the most powerful thermal power plant in the region. Another sensitive loss is the defeat of the presumably Patriot air defense system. The operators of this complex launched 4 missiles in a row, literally a few seconds later. An Iskander missile hits an American Western anti-aircraft battery. The roar of the patrolling drones and their dive towards the target is recorded by a journalist from the Middle East Information Agency. Unique footage was captured hundreds of meters from the impact on the military-industrial complex facilities. ABC correspondents waited out the attack in a shelter. With the start of the air raid, there was a live broadcast from the underground parking lot.
David, we just heard an air raid.
We just heard an air raid warning, an urgent warning, that we must go down to the bomb shelter. They say that the air defense system is working in Kiev. Explosions were heard, but we are safe. A combined attack by Garin drones and Iskander missiles thundered in Kremenchuk and Svetlovodsk. Drones exhaust air defense. Then there is a direct hit from ballistic missiles. According to preliminary data, about 500 drones and missiles were counted in Kiev. A massive attack by the enemy on the Poltava region. Administrative buildings and warehouses were damaged in the Kremenchuk district. It was not difficult to record the result of the missile attack on Ukrainian military-industrial complex facilities. Someone combined video from city cameras in different regions and broadcast live on the internet the video of the strikes, which, of course, greatly irritates the Kiev regime. Tonight, in response to the terrorist acts of the Kiev regime, the armed forces of the Russian Federation carried out a massive strike with high-precision long-range air, sea and land-based weapons, as well as strike unmanned aerial vehicles on design bureaus, enterprises for the production and repair of weapons and military equipment of Ukraine, workshops for the assembly of strike unmanned aerial vehicles, flight training centers, as well as weapons and military equipment depots of the Ukrainian army. The target of the strike was achieved. All designated objects were hit.
And the latest from the Ukraine-Russia war, where Ukraine has been battered yet again. This time, Russia has launched one of its largest drone attacks on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, faced what its mayor calls the biggest Russian drone strike yet in this war. Overnight, Russia unleashed 48 drones, 2 missiles, and 4 gliding bombs in Kharkiv alone, a strike that Mayor Ehor Terekov has described an open terror. The destruction was sweeping. At least 3 people were killed and 22 others injured. Among the victims, a baby and a 14-year-old girl. Further south, the city of Kherson also came under fire. Local officials said 2 more lives were lost in Russian strikes there. The attack comes on the heel of a massive wave of air assaults that swept across Ukraine on Thursday night. The attacks targeted multiple cities in what Moscow claims is retaliation for terror attacks by the Kyiv regime. Those attacks included Ukrainian drone raids on 5 Russian military bases last Sunday. On that night alone, 6 Ukrainians were killed and 80 more were injured, as over 400 drones and nearly 40 missiles struck cities nationwide. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called the overnight attacks by Russia a massive strike on cities and ordinary life. He said the onslaught touched almost all of Ukraine, including the capital Kyiv. The strikes also hit the northern city of Chernihiv and extended west to Lutsk and Ternopil, where Russia claimed it targeted military infrastructure. On Saturday morning, Ukrainian Air Force claimed they shot down a Russian Su-35 fighter jets in the Kursk direction. That's the claim made by Ukraine, to which Russia has not commented. The Ukrainian military called it a successful operation. But even as Ukraine tries to push back, the global debate deepens. On Friday, US President Donald Trump said he hopes that Russia does not resort to a nuclear war. He added that Ukraine gave a reason to Russia to bomb them.
I hope not. I hope not. I think it's a war that would have never happened. If I were president, that wouldn't have happened. I certainly hope not. Well, they gave Putin a reason to go in and bomb the hell out of him last night. That's something I didn't like about it. When I saw it, I said, here we go. Now it's going to be a strike.
This comes as Russia asked the UN nuclear watchdog on Friday to mediate between Moscow and Washington to resolve the question of what to do with US nuclear fuel stored at a Ukrainian power plant controlled by Russian forces. Russia wants to restart the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant that lies near one of the front lines of the war in Ukraine and once generated a fifth of Ukraine's electricity. The fuel question is one of various issues standing in the way. And joining us on the show tonight is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Welcome to We're On, Colonel Davis. I want to first start up with asking you that Russia has launched one of its biggest attack on Ukraine since its full-scale invasion a few years back. And it also comes at a time when Trump has clearly said that Ukraine gave reasons to Putin to bomb them. Your assessment of the situation, and where does all of this leave peace talks at this point of time?
I think that this is just a continuation. You talked about these strikes on Thursday night which went all across the country, and then the overnight shots against Kharkiv city, which was the biggest that had been of the war on the single city there. And I think you're just going to continue seeing this. When we saw Putin respond to his bombers being attacked on the same days that he had a civilian train attacked in southern Russia, another bridge that was knocked out in the southern part of the country, when the Kursk bridge was again attacked underwater, I think that he finally had just reached a point where he's going to take the gloves off, I think. And I think that what you're seeing in the anger that he had when he addressed the nation was very unusual for him. And so we've seen now 2 straight nights of significant bombing, and I doubt that that's the end of it. That's all coming simultaneous with increased capacity on the front lines, especially in the Sumy area and in the Kupiansk and Liman area on the eastern front. And you ask how this is going to play out towards peace talk. I think Russia has clearly indicated there's not going to be a peace negotiations. They have said that if you don't take this 12-point plan that they gave at Istanbul last week, which frankly is pretty much terms of surrender, then their ambassador to the United Nations said then they will win on the battlefield. And that looks like exactly what they're doing.
Colonel Davis, you do speak of how there's no end to the attacks from Russia and Ukraine, and now Russia has said that there's going to be no peace negotiations. That's what you say. I will seek your assessment on the fact that Trump has said that he hopes no nuclear attack from Russia. at this point of time, how much influence does US actually have on Russia? Because for the past few months, we have been seeing the US president urging the hostilities to stop, but there has hardly been any change on the battlefield.
Well, I would go so far as to say there hadn't been any change. You haven't seen any change from Volodymyr Zelensky. He has obviously continued and, in fact, has accelerated his attacks into Russian territory. You don't see any change in the Western European countries. They still talk about they want more sanctions. They want to build up combat power. They want to keep supporting Ukraine. And then on the Russian side, they have continued without stop their offensive operations on the front line and are now accelerating their air campaign. So if you're just looking at the reaction of it, the truth is the U.S. president has had no impact on any of this. The question is going to be, is he going to be willing to walk away from this and completely leave it up to the two sides to figure out, along with Europe? Or is he going to do what Lindsey Graham wants, which is to put in sanctions, whatever? That's not going to have any impact on the battlefield, though. So I think that we need to be sober-minded that there's very little that the American president can do in this.
Right, Colonel Davis, thanks very much for joining us here on Beyond and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
That they are bringing the conflict to a different level of escalation.
Which would mean what?
Which would mean better not to, and better to realize and to remember what they were doing. We have a limited conflict right now, which of course has a wider projection on the European security. But limited conflict should stay a limited conflict and not to escalate it, not to try to engulf World War III. That's the worst case scenario that we can imagine.
Yeah. Go ahead, Larry. Yeah, so, boy, this incident has really created quite a wide variety of opinions and reactions. I watched your exchange with John Helmer and Ray McGovern the other night. Let's start with the Ukrainians grossly exaggerated the effect of their attack. While it was, let's call it brilliant, operationally brilliant, being able to infiltrate these trucks to Russia and then at some depth, and then be able to launch those drones ostensibly against these targets with the intent of attacking and destroying, as the general said, a third of Russia's strategic bomber capability. Audacious, but that didn't happen. Apparently, the drone attacks at 3 of the airports completely failed. Whether it was electronic warfare, air defense system, operational failure on the Ukrainian, I don't know. But they failed. The other 2 airports that were hit, it turned out only destroyed about 5 to 7 aircraft. It's not entirely clear, but what is clear is that some of those aircraft were actually decommissioned. They were not, active in the strategic doctrine of Russia. That said, this was still, despite it not being consequential in terms of physical damage, it was extremely damaging psychologically for the Russians that they reacted to this with great anger. Now, Ray and I have had we've got a difference of opinion on this, and I always value Ray's opinions and judgment. But Ray was arguing that this is the reaction is the Russians is to this quote terrorism that took place on Friday and Saturday, the attack on the two bridges, the attack in Kursk, which didn't kill anybody to my knowledge, but destroyed a bridge, and then the attack in Bryansk, where the bridge was down so that it would collide with an oncoming passenger train and killed at least 7 people, wounded maybe upwards of 100 people. Well, yeah, those are terrorist attacks. And the Russians are rightly outraged about it. But let's not forget, these are not the first terrorist attacks over the course of this last 3 years. You had the attack on the Kerch Bridge in October 2022. I forget how many, it killed 1 or 2 people, but it blew a hole in the bridge and they had to close the bridge down and repair it. That was significant. And then March 2024, the attack on Crocus City Hall. My God, they killed over 135 people and wounded over 341. That was enormous. I mean, that's on a completely different scale compared to what happened in Bryansk, dropping a bridge on a train. And yet Russia's reaction to that has been far, it's now saying that we're moving into, this is no longer a special military operation. This is a counterterrorism operation. And that is not just a word chosen because it's convenient or it sounds cool. This goes back to how Russia carried out the war in Chechnya from 1999 through 2009, 2010, through the Second Chechen War. The counterterrorism operation means an escalation in the violence by the Russian military. It means certain targets that previously were considered off limits or to be avoided are now on the table. And I think that includes Vladimir Zelensky, who can be now targeted and taken out. We're going to see, because Russia suffered assassinations at the hands of Ukrainian terrorist plots. At least 2, if not 3 generals. So you got to ask, why is Russia reacting now so strongly to this? And this is where Ray and I, respectfully disagree with each other. Ray thinks that it's the terror that Russia's ignoring the attack on the strategic component, and I think this American colonel was correct in recognizing the gravity of it. That although Ukraine did not succeed in inflicting the kind of damage that they claimed, nonetheless, they demonstrated a willingness to hit those targets without regard to the consequences. And the outrage Putin and company, I think Ray's position is, well, Putin, if this is such a big deal, Putin and company would have said something about it. The fact that they're not specifically commenting on it, I think there's another explanation. They're embarrassed as hell. And why rub their face in it? They're going to take corrective action. And it's not going to be, there was missile strikes and drone strikes over the last 24 hours. That's not the retaliation. The retaliation that's coming is going to be quite severe. And we know that thanks to Donald Trump. Because we've seen what a difference more than a week makes with Trump and Putin. On May 26th, Trump was derisive of Putin. He's crazy. Remember that? And he said, I don't know why he's doing what he's doing. Well, they had a conversation on Wednesday of this week. Now Trump's singing a different tune. President Putin, didn't call him Putin, called him President Putin, strongly emphasized that he's going to have to respond to this. And, Trump didn't say, I told him, hell no, you're not going to do that. Trump didn't say any of that. And you got to then look at what the U.S. State Department did within hours of the end of that conversation. They came out with a warning to Americans in Ukraine, basically, get the hell out, take cover. Something bad's going to happen. So, this attack on these, the attack on 2 of the airfields, the attempted attack on 3 of the others, has marked a shift, and we'll call it a watershed moment in this war between Ukraine and Russia, and it's going up. It's now escalating.
You mentioned the phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump said that he didn't know about what was going on with the case of Ukrainian attack. But what kind of argument is that? Is that going to put him in a better position, in your opinion?
Oh, no. Let's call him Butterfly McQueen. Do you know who Butterfly McQueen is? Butterfly McQueen was this she was a path-breaking black actress in Hollywood. And she appeared in the movie Gone with the Wind. And in that movie, her most iconic, memorable line was, "Oh, Miss Scarlett, I don't know nothing about birth and no babies." She had pretended to be a midwife and then admitted, "I don't know anything about birth and babies." That's Donald Trump.
Salute, family.
Attack on Russia? I don't know nothing. Or we call him Sergeant Schultz. We can come up with all sorts of television characters. You remember Sergeant Schultz from Hooligan's Hero? I know nothing. I see nothing. I hear nothing. Please, Trump. What you're admitting is you're completely out of the loop. I think it highly, highly unlikely that Ukraine planned this for 18 months. I mean, this is a story we're being given and people are repeating it. I think it's nonsense. But they planned it for 18 months and didn't leak a word to the CIA, their buddies who they've been planning other operations with. Yeah, that makes sense. More likely is there were CIA officers who know about it, and maybe they had received guidance. Don't get directly involved, but keep us up to date on what they're doing. So the CIA knew, which means at least Trump would have had it in a briefing, special access program briefing. Did the CIA actually was it involved with the planning and execution? That's possible. I can't rule that out. But what's interesting is to look at the sequence of events that started on Sunday in the aftermath of the attacks on those airfields. Lavrov calls Marco Rubio. Now, I had heard, I haven't been able to get a confirmation of this, that Marco Rubio got called at 8 p.m. at night, East Coast time. Well, that's 3 a.m. in the morning, Russia time. Lavrov, he's older than I am, so he's an old man. You got to be in bed at that time. So, some suggest that, it was just a normal phone call. He just wanted to call up Marco and say, "Hey, how about those peace talks we're having tomorrow? Maybe we can, have a great outcome." No. Lavrov was calling Rubio because basically Putin wanted to know, what did the damn Americans know about this and what are they saying? And let them know that we're going to hold anybody that was even peripherally involved with this responsible. And the responsible means, well, there'll be targets of counterattacks. So they had a conversation at what was an ungodly hour from Lavrov. And then Rubio apparently got off the phone and called Donald Trump like, Mr. President, we got a problem. And notice what happened then on Monday and Tuesday with Trump's social media. It was quiet. Keeping Trump off of social, are you kidding me? Man, he's like a crack addict learning to get a fix when it comes to social media. And I maintain what they're trying to figure out, how the hell do we diffuse this? How do we keep this from escalating? And at the same time, they're trying to figure that out. The Russians showed up in Istanbul for the talks with Ukraine, but it wasn't talks. Medinsky, the lead negotiator, spent 2 hours, 15 minutes before that meeting with Umarov, who was the ostensible head of that Ukrainian delegation. And it was not, I would say, a pleasant meeting, at least for Ukraine. And Medinsky was letting him know in no uncertain terms what the approach was going to be going forward. And that they take this deal, or something worse is coming. Umarov scoots off to Washington to brief the Trump team, and he's not carrying good news in that. Then on Tuesday, again, remember, Trump is like sort of mute, silent with respect to social media, not saying a word about any of the attacks, no apologies yet, nothing. Pete Hegseth comes out and announces, that Ukrainian, contact group that we've had, that we meet like every month. I'm not attending, and I'm not only not going to show up in person, I'm not even going to attend from Zoom. I'm sending Matt Whitaker. So this marks the first time Secretary of Defense, whether it was Austin or Hegseth, has not attended that meeting. Do you think that was just a coincidence? I maintain it was one of Trump's ways of signaling to Russia, okay, we're backing away from this Ukraine project. We recognize that this is too dangerous. And then came the phone call on Wednesday. I don't know who initiated it. I suspect it was Trump, but we'll see. But in any event, Putin, if you watch Putin's speech that day, and I don't know if the phone call with Trump took place before or after that speech, Putin was angry. He was very stern. His body language was such that he was, let's call it, aggressive. And they, he even in that speech, or it was a discussion with his national security team, but they televised it live for all of Russia. I don't even know if there's any sense in continuing these talks with these terrorists. So they moved it into that new realm as a counterterrorism operation. So when you put all that together, the Russians put the United States on notice, and they're going to retaliate, and there's going to be a significant retaliation, so significant that Trump felt compelled to tell Marco Rubio, get your people out of there. Something bad's coming.
Laurie, Putin said that the main reason of this attack was to somehow sabotage the talks between Ukrainians and Russians, or maybe trying to convince the Russians that there is nothing coming out of the talks. Let's not go to Istanbul to talk with Ukrainian, which I would assume that would be the best outcome of what has happened for the British government. They're doing everything to get something like that from the talks, because in my opinion, they're not happy with what is happening right now in terms of the direct talks between Russians and Ukrainians. And with the talk with what the Russian ambassador said to the British media, he said that this escalation is so dangerous. I assume that the objective of this sort of argument on his part is the British government, is not the United States specifically. How do you see the way that the British government is trying to manipulate everything? We had Starmer coming out that we have been threatened by Russia. We have to build up our military while nobody's threatening the United Kingdom. I haven't seen anything in the media pointing at that direction. How can we understand this sort of activity, this sort of complications, these sort of communication interactions that are happening right now between Russia and the United Kingdom?
Well, actually, I think Russia is, I understand, Russia's pressuring the Brits to shutter their embassy in Moscow. They'll break off diplomatic relations. You know, I think it's important to understand Russia's approach to these so-called negotiations with Ukraine. I think it is wrong to believe that Russia thinks there is a way to achieve a peaceful, negotiated settlement with Ukraine. Russia absolutely does not believe that. Putin doesn't believe that. But they need, from the standpoint of dealing with the global South and the other BRICS members, Russia needs to be perceived as trying to obtain a negotiated settlement. That way, these other countries feel under less pressure from the West to, push Russia. This terrorist attack, as Russia is portraying it, has now given Russia an out because they've been negotiating in good faith, and look what it got them. It got them a terrorist attack, an attack on Russia's strategic bombers, which is also part of that terrorist attack. That's how Russia's defining it. Even though I would argue that that's a military attack, but still Russia's perceiving that and lumping that as a terrorist attack. The talks and what Russia delivered to the Ukrainian delegation, a memorandum, was basically a document of surrender. And, Ukraine's rejected it. And, in fact, Zelensky even said he doesn't see any value in any more meetings. So, Russia has achieved what it wanted to achieve of making Ukraine the culprit for the breakdown of negotiations. Within that, then this gets back to the question of Great Britain. Great Britain remains the biggest bad actor in this entire drama. And yet, I don't see Russia wanting to do much to them because, it's like having a mosquito buzzing around your head. Annoying, but not a deadly threat, just annoying. And that's what the Brits are. They're absolutely annoying, but they're impotent.
Larry, do you feel that they're somehow capable of manipulating Germany with the new chancellor? How do you see any sort of leverage on their part in Germany right now?
Where, between what, the UK and
the United Kingdom and Germany?
No.
Right now, they're sending right after the call between the two presidents, Merz is in the United States talking with anytime that Vladimir Putin is talking with Donald Trump, they're trying to do something. Europeans are trying to do something to maybe talk with Vladimir Putin on phone or maybe a new visit from the Europeans. They're somehow, I don't know, they're trying to manage Donald Trump in the direction that they want Donald Trump to be.
Manage Donald Trump? Are you crazy? He's uncontrollable. I mean, look at his girl fight with Elon Musk yesterday. You're ugly. You're stupid. Oh my God. A billionaire bitch club. Okay. It was just, so nobody controls Trump. Trump, he decides sort of what he's going to do, and he does it. And whether he actually consults with people and gets good advice, usually not. He's shown that over and over and over. He's trying to salvage, maintain a relationship with Putin. But I gotta believe that the Russians don't see Trump as a reliable negotiating partner. I think they see him as unreliable and volatile, and somewhat unpredictable. So they got to figure out how to try to manage that, and that gets into managing expectations as well.
Yeah, you mean managing the situation, not Donald Trump, because he's
Yeah. Just they know that Trump is susceptible to flattery, so they do that. They go out of their way not to overtly disrespect him. Well, they may be laughing about him behind their backs, behind his back. They make sure that they do everything in a respectful manner, knowing that with his fragile narcissistic ego, he would take umbrage and start punching back, just like he did with Elon. Completely unnecessary. But that's been Trump's. That's been his hallmark, particularly as he gets older. He becomes more brittle that way.
Here is what Donald Trump said during the meeting that he had with Merz about Russia and Ukraine.
And speaking of ending wars in this group, you were very critical of Vladimir Putin a couple of days ago. What kind of play is he playing from your perspective?
Well, look, he got hit. He's been doing hitting, so I understand it. But he got hit hard. And I don't think he's playing games. I've always said he wanted the whole thing. I thought he wanted the entire everything having to do with Ukraine.
What sort of argument is that he wants all of Ukraine? I don't know if he somehow is playing a game, because if we assume that he's playing a game that says Russia wanted all of Ukraine, I saved Ukraine from that, and let's go and find some sort of solution. Other than that, I don't find any sort of reason behind it.
Yeah, no, it's just Trump's just making that up. From the outset, Putin's goal was not to take all of Ukraine at all, and that's been a Western lie fed into the system to try to rally public support in the West against Putin. What is concerning is when Trump says things like that, it just reflects a fundamental ignorance about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Because in Trump's world, as he said yesterday, this is like two kids fighting. Well, you got to let them fight it out. Well, I think there's another more apt metaphor. The Ukrainians and Russians are in a burning building, and Donald Trump is standing outside as the arsonist who helped set the building on fire. He's responsible. Biden's responsible. Obama's responsible. George W. Bush is responsible. This has been a project underway since Bill Clinton was president to go to war with Russia, destroy Russia, and take control of its assets. And Donald Trump is certainly proud of the fact that he gave javelins to Ukraine. So he hasn't been about peace. He's been aiding and abetting this whole disaster. And he's in the unique position that he can put an end to it today. But he hasn't done that.
Not only javelins, here is what he said about Nord Stream.
Russia, are you willing to put more pressure on Putin to end the war by imposing new sanctions on Russia and also on China?
Well, remember, I'm the one that ended Nord Stream 2, going to a place called Germany, come to think of it. I'm sorry I did that. But I ended Nord Stream 2. Nobody else did. And then when Biden came in, he immediately approved it. That's the largest, essentially the largest pipeline in the world, going to Germany and other countries. And by the way, we have so much oil and gas, you will not be able to buy it all. I mean, you literally, we have so much, and I hope we're going to make that a part of our trade deal because we have more than anybody else. We have actually the most by far in the world, probably double what anyone else has. So we'll work on that. I'm sure that's something we'll discuss today.
Mr. President.
He's taking responsibility for the sabotage of Nord Stream pipeline. It's so somehow amazing that he tries to play both sides, that he says to Vladimir Putin, I'm with you, I want to put an end to the conflict. On the other hand, he somehow shows Europeans how aggressive, how radical he's toward Russia, has been toward Russia, and while he denies his role in what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, it is. Trump's in just a delusional state. He tried to hold up the Nord Stream pipeline, but the Nord Stream pipeline was ready to go into operation, so it was completed, despite Trump's attempts to interfere, and it was under Biden that it was destroyed, and it was at Biden's orders to the CIA that it was destroyed. But again, this is Trump. He takes, again, he's so insecure. And, this is what's sort of crazy about people like Trump. They're extremely wealthy. He's been very successful in his world of real estate development. And as a television entertainer. So he's had some real accomplishments. But, he got to keep telling you how great he is because, he's not secure in himself. And, when you have somebody and the narcissism, the insecurity, boy, that's a dangerous mix. And, what he should have been talking about was it is unfortunate that with the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, that Germany was deprived of cheap natural gas so it could fund, keep its industries intact and be in a position to actually produce weapons that we need in NATO. I mean, if he's thinking about this sensibly, but he's not. It's all about, oh, look what I've done. And he takes credit for things that he didn't do.
I think that's a key issue when it comes to Russia, China, and Iran, but they're not going to say, Donald Trump, you are big and beautiful.
Yeah.
He's not going to get some sort of compliment on from these countries. That's why he's going to get a lot from Europeans. And how, Larry, with the case of Germany, do you think that Donald Trump, with this visit of the German chancellor, does he really believe that they can provide energy to Germany at the level and with the price being reasonable for Germany?
No, man. Germany's going to take it up the backside. United States, we're happy to supply natural gas, but it's going to come at a price. I mean, there's no way it can be cheaper than the Nord Stream, just simply because it's going to be loaded on ships and carted across the ocean. With the Nord Stream pipeline, it came straight in, and the Russians were able to offer a much better price. And again, you get to watch the Germans wallow in their own mess. They helped create this. They didn't stand up for themselves. They didn't protest it. They didn't accuse the United States of an act of war. You've destroyed one of our natural resources. And the reality is it's hurting German people. But Trump doesn't care.
Yeah. And when it comes, Larry, because one part of this situation with the energy in Europe and specifically in Germany is what's going on. One aspect would be what's going on with the 500% secondary sanctions on Russia that they're talking right now in the United States about. They want to put it on China, India, and eventually on Europe. Do you think that Merz was talking about this with Donald Trump? Is he concerned about it?
I don't think so, but I don't know if that came up. I don't see why. If anything, Merz, he did talk to members of Congress, and in that conjunction, that may have come up, and I suspect he would have been very enthusiastic about it, wanting to impose greater sanctions necessarily on Russia. Except what Lindsey Graham is proposing is basically sanctions on China and India that will hurt them and hurt the United States. It's just, none of this is being thought through.
Here is what Donald Trump said in terms of sanctions.
Go ahead,
Mr. President, so would you consider to put more sanctions on Russia? Because this discussion is going on now for weeks and months, and you tweeted about it once, but then nothing happens. So
yeah, when I see the moment when we're not going to make a deal, when this thing won't stop,
is there a deadline?
in that moment, yeah, it's in my brain, the deadline. When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. It takes two to tango. But we're going to be very tough. Whether it's Russia or anybody else, we're going to be very tough.
Yeah, the deadline is in his brain. I don't know if he has it.
Yeah, nobody's home in that brain. That's the problem. This is another idle threat by Trump. Russia would like to have normal relations with the United States. And despite the history of the last 30 years, where the United States, through NATO, has been basically constantly at war with Russia. And instead of the United States, stopping the attacks, we've continued to attack and attack and attack and attack and facilitate efforts to destroy Russia. At some point, I've described it before with you, it's like being in an abusive relationship with somebody. And there comes a moment where you just got to walk away and say, I'm not having contact with this person anymore. I'm not dealing with them. You just walk away. That's what I think Russia ultimately needs to do. Just, tell the United States, have a nice day. You go about your own way, and we're going to go about ours. But, Trump, this is more Trump bombast, because the fact of the matter is that there's nothing the United States can do to Russia that's going to alter Russia's courses of action right now.
Do you feel that if Donald Trump doesn't get a Ukrainian settlement in a long run, that would cause some sort of problem between NATO and Russia? Because considering the behavior on the part of European leaders, it's somehow, if they do something radical as they did with the Russian nuclear bombers, and they did something with the Kursk region, we were somehow surprised, and right now nuclear bombers is something, the limits, this red line is moving toward Russia, and Russia, it comes to a moment as it happened with the conflict in Ukraine, says enough is enough, let's go and attack them, let's teach them a lesson. Do you feel that we're going to get into that moment, or if we don't get anything in as somehow a Ukrainian settlement, considering negotiations?
Well, if rhetoric, if words equated into action, then yes, there'd be a war between Russia and England, Germany, and France in a heartbeat, no doubt about it. But fortunately, the reality and truths, and the fact is that none of these countries have the military strength, either in manpower or in weapons, that they could even last a week going up against Russia. And then there's the issue that Russia's not going to invade them, so they would have to somehow go to Russia. Good luck with that. Just ask Napoleon how that turned out. So I don't know what it's going to take to bring an end to this kind of rhetorical excess on the part of Starmer and Macron and Merz. But at some point, Russia is going to deal a death blow to Ukraine. And at that point, these countries will be faced with, do we jump into this war or do we walk away? And if they jump into it, it'll be at their peril of their own destruction.
I think as these terrorist acts on the part of Ukraine are increasing, the doubt on the situation of Odessa in the future is much more, they're much more visible in the mind of Russians right now. Shall we let Odessa and Nikolaev in their hand? What would that cause in terms of these terrorist acts in the future? Because we know that how much important Odessa is in terms of the attacks in the Kursk region, in terms of how they can attack Russia. Do you feel that Russia is somehow internally discussing the situation with the Odessa and Nikolaev going up to Kharkov?
Oh no! Well, look, I believe one of the messages that was delivered on Monday when Medinsky sat down with Umarov was, this is the last best offer you're going to get, because the next offer means we're taking Odessa, we're taking Nikolaev, and you will no longer have access to the Black Sea. We'll control all access to the Black Sea. You're going to be cut off from the sea. Then that was the message that Umarov carried back to Zelensky and carried back to Washington, D.C. So, Russia, look, before this is all over, I don't know whether it'll be this year or into early next year. I frankly don't see how Ukraine can sustain its army, the military effort, without continued support from the United States, which looks to be drying up. But Russia is going to ultimately take significant portions, if not all, of the territory east of the Dnieper. If for no other reason as a buffer zone. Just keep the Ukrainians behind that wall of water that represents the Dnieper River. Keep them on the west side, and Russia will then proceed to rebuild eastern Ukraine.
Larry, those people who are arguing that supporting Ukraine and sending more weapons to Ukraine, as General Jack Keane on the Fox News was arguing, and here is what he said. Let me play it for you.
The peace process exhibited by the United States to leverage someone to change their behavior. We've got to do the same thing with Russia. It is part of the process. It's not outside the process. And that means we got to leverage him. And we don't know if that will actually work. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
But we do know what is not working. And just the diplomatic talking is not working. So the leverage has got to be, I think, number one, military assistance, and give them the robust air defense systems and the other things they desperately need. Let's leverage Putin just as we did Zelensky. We don't know, let's be frank, if it's going to work, but it certainly is worth a try at this point, because diplomatic talks are not getting us there.
Larry, it's somehow amazing that he tries to picture the situation totally the opposite way. We haven't seen any sort of diplomacy, any sort of talks happening between the two parties, meaning the United States and Russia. And while we had the experience with the military operation, with the support to Ukraine, more than 3 years and 3 years and a half we are in this conflict. Go ahead.
Well, Keane, listening to Keane, his strategy is let's throw Jello at the wall and see what sticks. Well, that's not how military plans are supposed to operate. The military planning process is supposed to come up with courses of action. And with respect to each of those courses of action, identify what resources do we need, what are our chances of a successful outcome, what are the risks, what can we expect the enemy to do in response to if we take this course of action. This shows why he was a failed general. Number one, we do have negotiations from the standpoint that once Trump and Putin were talking, and then Witkoff could go to Russia and meet with Putin. Yeah, that was progress, something that hadn't happened. And just the fact that over this last, on Sunday, that Lavrov felt free to call up Marco Rubio and say, we got a problem with you. And, at least the communication is going back and forth. But, what you're seeing Jack Keane do in that clip, he's acknowledging the fact that Ukraine is losing the war and that there's no clear path forward for giving Ukraine a chance for victory.
I would wonder where is Steve Witkoff right now, and how you mentioned the talks, but we don't see a Steve Witkoff anymore.
Yeah, he's sort of fallen out of the limelight for now. I don't know what that means. Maybe he is just still quietly meeting with the Israelis and Hamas. I would hope so, but also the talks with Iran are sort of they're on hold right now. Mm-hmm. So we'll see.
Donald Trump wanted to talk about the Iranian talks with Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. And Putin said he's willing to participate, he's willing to help the process of negotiations. What does Donald Trump want from Vladimir Putin, in your opinion?
Well, I think he'd like to get Putin to persuade the Iranians to give up all nuclear enrichment or uranium enrichment, and Putin's not going to do that. But the language that Trump used was very careful in terms of to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And Russia, yeah, we can do that because we know it's already true. We've got a security agreement in place with Iran that pledged to work with them on their peaceful nuclear exchange, and we wouldn't do that if they had an active nuke. So yeah, no, we'll help. Sure, Mr. President, we can help you get the assurances and proof you need that Iran doesn't have it. I hope Trump takes the deal, but I've seen some disturbing signs that Trump's getting ready to launch the military strike against Iran. It may just be, again, posturing for negotiation's sake, or maybe genuine. I don't know.
Larry, do you believe that the way that Donald Trump says no enrichment to Iran, does he really believe that Iran would go in that direction? I don't see that coming. The supreme leader of Iran just said
he's hopeful that Iran would go in that direction, but as you and I both know, Iran's not going in that direction. It's sort of a fool's hope. So Trump is then, he's faced with his promise that he'd bring peace to stop the war between Ukraine and Russia. Well, that's now dead. He's basically conceding the war is going to go on, and there's not a lot he can do about it. He's in a position that he can get this deal with Iran, but it's going to be at a cost to his relationship with the pro-Zionist crowd. Now, I would note, we just got word yesterday, day before yesterday, that 3 of the most ardent supporters of Israel that were in Trump's National Security Council, this one woman who'd actually been in the IDF herself, that they've been booted out of the NSC. So Trump is like house cleaning, getting rid of some of these uber Zionists. That may be an indicator that, Trump's trying to come to a more sensible position with respect to Iran.
Larry, how's the situation between Hamas and Israel right now? And you mentioned Steve Witkoff maybe trying to cut a deal between the two. But the situation in Gaza is everybody knows what's going on. It's a nightmare, and starvation, killing the people. And do you see any sort of future for the talks, for what's going on between Hamas and the United States? I'm not considering Israel because I don't see Netanyahu as Zelensky in Ukraine. They hope Zelensky wants some sort of Ukrainian settlement. Everybody knows the outcome of that settlement would be the removal of Zelensky and his administration. The same goes to Netanyahu and his administration.
The key there is, if the United States decides that the peace talks should go forward, they'll go forward, because we're in a position to dictate to Israel. Israel won't like it. I got confirmed yesterday. I can't reveal the source, but that there's still a lot of CIA files that the CIA has not released regarding the assassination of JFK. And the reason is because Israel is so strongly implicated in that assassination. That's why they're covering it up. So, one of these days I could, one way to get for Trump to buy some protection for himself would actually be to release those files and make it clear how destructive Israel has been, how unfriendly it has been, how, murderous it has been in its relationship with the United States. And that would really further isolate it. Because, right now, apart from the United States, there's not another major country that's backing Israel uncritically. Not one.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw the interview with Matt Miller and the way that he right now sees the conflict in Ukraine, in Gaza. Here is what he said, Larry.
On in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government had not concluded that they've committed war crimes. Still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have.
And
they were while you were there.
But let me qualify that. There are two ways to think about the commission of war crimes. One is if the state has pursued a policy to deliberately committing war crimes or is acting reckless in a way that aids and abets war crimes. And that, I think, is an open question. I think what is almost certainly not an open question is that there have been individual incidents that have been war crimes where members of the Israeli military have committed war crimes. So ultimately, in almost every major conflict, including conflicts prosecuted by democracies, you will see individual members of the militaries commit war crimes. And the way you judge a democracy is whether they hold those people accountable.
But Israel hasn't.
That's my point.
Right.
Is we have not yet seen them hold sufficient numbers of the military accountable, and I think it's an open question whether they're going to.
I'm really struck that you think
Yeah, I don't know how can they believe that Netanyahu would go after some sort of investigation in what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah, no, he's not. This is the situation is worsening domestically for Netanyahu. Now that you've had both Ehud Olmert and Ehud Barak, both former prime ministers, come out and say, hey, Israel's engaged in committing war crimes. Now, they're being dismissed as political opponents of Netanyahu, et cetera, and doing this for politics. But the fact of the matter is, their voice carries some authority. And even more importantly, you're in trouble when Piers Morgan turns against you after he's been, celebrating everything that Israel had been doing to defeat Hamas.
That's a sign that the mainstream media, or maybe the British media, is going against Israel, or somehow they're changing their mind because they cannot get whatever they're asking.
Well, again, with Britain, the number of Muslim migrants that now live in that country and are now part of the voting public is significant. So naturally, they're going to start lining up against. There's a real split in the UK that it's going to sharpen, and it's going to sharpen in a way that those who are pro-Palestinian will overwhelm those who are pro-Israeli.
So far, it wasn't interpreted in a foreign policy of the United Kingdom. I don't know if in the future that would be the case. And Starmer is not in a good position right now. He's just so weak. Even I would argue weaker than Macron in France. And
well, he spent so much time in Ukraine. He should probably consider running for office in Ukraine. He'd probably actually get more support. He'd probably line up more votes for himself in Ukraine because he is now extremely unpopular. And the opposition that's coming from his own party and within his own party is significant. It's not to be discounted.
Yeah. Larry, before wrapping up, you mentioned the fight between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. One of the very interesting points that during this fight has happened was the Elon Musk just declaring that we need a third party in the United States. This doesn't work. I think many people want that.
Yeah.
Many people want some sort of solution for what's going on in the United States. Do you feel that if Elon Musk considers that as a real issue for the U.S. policy, for the political system of the United States, the help coming from Elon Musk, which we know that would be crucial and important, could help to create a third party in the United States?
Yeah, he'd had the financial resources to do it. There are already, we've already got third parties, but none of them are really viable or have any kind of broad appeal. The Libertarian Party, there's this new group out called No Labels. But the entrenched bureaucratic interests that the two dominant political parties currently serve are destroying America. And frankly, I don't know if it's correctable without massive economic upheaval and possibly even a war. Russia, you look at the transformation of Russia from what it was under the Soviet Union in 1991 to what it is today. And it is a night and day difference. Dramatic transformation. Well, that came about in part because of the utter collapse of the Soviet system in the 1990s. And, the fact that the middle class in Russia almost disappeared in the 1990s, only 7% of the population was classified as middle class, and the life expectancy was declining from 63 to 56. And, to get that kind of, you're a scientist, what that kind of decline mathematically signifies in terms of actually human beings, a horrendous number. So it's going to take something like that to bring about change in the United States. And it's out of that kind of chaos that you could potentially get a third party. But, right now there's so much pressure to protect the status quo that they actually create barriers for entry for the third parties.
I think the case that you mentioned can be considered about China as well. Look at what China is today and compare it to 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's, on the other hand, it's so much mind-boggling, so much unbelievable the way that the United States is just destroying itself.
Right.
And Russia is, Larry, after all, Russia is a very important player when it comes to Ukraine, Middle East, and Taiwan. I don't know when that reality can hit the decision makers in the United States. Donald Trump talking with Vladimir Putin, talking about Iran, one of the issues, Iran, China, Taiwan, everything. But do you see any sort of future to the reality coming to the mind or somehow hitting the mindset of the people in Washington?
Well, look, that's the thing that's unfolding before us. So you're living through a time that when you're my age, looking back, this period we're going through will be seen as the birth of a new economic and political order, one in which the U.S. leadership will have been basically stripped away, and the U.S. through a combination of its own actions, as well as its failure to respond appropriately to external actions, will have frittered away its status as the world's leading economic and military power. It's already no longer the world's leading military power. And its question from an economic standpoint is certainly up in the air. So, and that's where the United States is having a real difficult time coming to grips with the fact that it's no longer in control of the process.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
All right, my friend. Always a pleasure. We'll
see you on Monday.
$20 million tons of gold confirmed, worth 12-point-something trillion dollars.
The rise of Africa.
In a stunning revelation that made headlines across the world, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni announced on June 7th, during his State of the Nation address, that the country had discovered gold reserves worth a staggering $12.8 trillion. That's right, 31 million metric tons of gold-bearing ore, with an estimated 320,000 metric tons of pure extractable gold buried beneath Ugandan soil.
Continue arguing for the continued export of raw materials in Africa when there is 90% more value in that product that you are giving to the outsiders.
Museveni confidently stated that officials from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development had briefed his cabinet on the discovery, claiming the country stood to earn at least $700 million in royalties. For a nation grappling with development challenges, this was not just news. it was a potential economic revolution.
If estimates are correct, mineral development experts say this latest gold discovery could be worth more in revenues than the oil fields in the west of the country.
Excitement swept across the nation, but not everyone was buying into the golden dream. Skepticism quickly followed, from both within Uganda and abroad. Mining experts and geologists began to question the numbers. Alex Kwatampora Binigo, president of the Geological Society of Uganda, called the figures weird. He explained that such massive quantities of gold would be historically unprecedented and insisted the company behind the analysis, Wagage Mining Uganda Limited, needed to clarify the data. The fact that Wagage is Chinese-owned and the analysis was possibly conducted in Mandarin raised questions about translation errors or misinterpretation. Don Bwesigi Binyina, a mineral and energy policy analyst, dropped a bombshell. According to US Geological Survey data, only about 244,000 metric tons of gold have ever been discovered globally. If Uganda's numbers are accurate, that would mean it alone holds more gold than the rest of the world combined. 115 times more, to be exact. Is that even possible? Or did the president confuse ounces with tons? Cut to government officers dodging questions. When journalists from The Independent tried to verify these figures with Uganda's Directorate of Geological Survey and Mines, officials were evasive. One senior official admitted that only the permanent secretary could speak on the matter, while another quietly revealed that the numbers were likely misinterpreted and still being verified with Wagagai. All of this unfolds against a tense international backdrop. Uganda is currently under sanctions, and President Museveni has not held back. In a defiant statement, he declared that Uganda will not export raw minerals.
I said over my dead body, I have banned all the export of unprocessed minerals from here. Let them stay in the ground. When the grandchildren come, they will get them out.
Not now, not ever, and only over his dead body. That means refining, processing, and developing Uganda's mineral wealth must happen within the country, on Uganda's terms. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the transitional president of Burkina Faso, has done this before. Traoré took a bold and unprecedented steps to reclaim control over his country's gold resources. This move is part of a broader national strategy aimed at asserting economic sovereignty, ending foreign exploitation, and redirecting the country's natural wealth to benefit the Burkinabe people. Gold is Burkina Faso's most valuable export, accounting for over 70% of national export revenues. Yet for years, the majority of this wealth has flowed out through foreign-owned mining companies, leaving little behind for the local population and the state. Since coming to power in September 2022, Traoré has made resource nationalization a top priority. His government has begun reviewing and renegotiating mining contracts that were signed under previous regimes, many of which were heavily skewed in favor of foreign companies, especially those from France, Canada, and Australia. These companies often paid minimal royalties while extracting massive profits. In response, Traoré's administration has revoked the licenses of operators found guilty of tax evasion, illegal activity, or failure to meet their contractual obligations. These mines were then placed under state control or handed over to state-aligned entities. A significant part of the reform also involves cracking down on gold smuggling. For years, a large portion of Burkina Faso's gold was being trafficked illegally across borders, particularly to neighboring countries. Under Traoré, security forces and intelligence units have been mobilized to intercept smuggling networks and ensure that the country's gold production is properly accounted for. These measures aim to stop the hemorrhaging of national wealth and redirect public infrastructure, education, defense, and economic development. Reclaiming gold mines is not just an economic decision, it is a political statement. Traoré's actions reflect a broader Pan-African vision shared by other Sahelian leaders, particularly in Mali and Niger. These countries, now part of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, are uniting around the shared goal of rejecting neocolonial influence and building new models of cooperation rooted in sovereignty and self-determination. Traoré has emphasized in his speeches that natural resources like gold must serve the people, not foreign empires, and that reclaiming them is essential to financing national development and ensuring long-term stability. However, this effort is not without its challenges. Reclaiming and managing gold mines requires technical expertise, investment, and a corruption-resistant state apparatus. Additionally, Burkina Faso now risks political and economic retaliation from Western powers whose financial interests have been disrupted. Internally, Traoré must contend with potential opposition from local elites or military actors who benefited from the previous system. Still, the move has been welcomed by many ordinary citizens who see it as a long overdue correction to decades of economic injustice. Traoré's stance is symbolic of a growing shift across Africa, where leaders and citizens alike are demanding greater control over their natural wealth and rejecting the legacy of exploitation. If successful, Burkina Faso's approach under Traoré could set a powerful example for other resource-rich nations on the continent seeking to reclaim their sovereignty and chart a new course toward true independence. Museveni, following the footsteps of Captain Traoré to ban exports, sends a clear message to the West. Uganda is done being a source of raw wealth for foreign exploitation. For Museveni, the gold isn't just a resource. It's a symbol of sovereignty, resistance, and self-determination. But here's the question. Is this discovery real? Is Uganda on the brink of becoming the world's next gold superpower? Or is this a political mirage meant to stir nationalist pride? And can President Museveni protect Uganda's resources from international interests while fighting sanctions and internal doubts? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
It was just past midnight when the hum began. Not loud, not obvious, but in the dry stillness of Burkina Faso's southeast border, it was unmistakable. The high-pitched whisper of something mechanical slicing through the dark. And then, just seconds later, hell fell from the sky. A single unmanned drone, flying low and silent, locked onto a convoy of vehicles creeping across the bushland. No headlights, no transponders, no insignias. Inside those vehicles, armed men, mercenaries, loaded with Western gear, heavy rifles, encrypted radios, and combat-grade night vision. Their destination, a strategic oil refinery under construction just 50 kilometers from the border. Their objective, sabotage, chaos, and if possible, kill Burkinabe engineers and steal intel. They never made it. In one devastating flash, the lead vehicle was vaporized. The second flipped into flames. The rest scattered, but it was too late. The drone made a second pass, then a third. By the time ground forces arrived, the sand was blackened and smoking. Every mercenary neutralized. Burkina Faso had struck first, and the world noticed. At first, there was confusion. Who authorized it? What drone did they use? Where did they get the coordinates? And then, the facts emerged. Traoré had ordered the strike himself. The drone, a foreign prototype, North Korean design, Russian modifications, AES encrypted targeting system, and the intel intercepted communications and satellite triangulation from Mali and Niger. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was a demonstration, a message to mercenaries, a message to their sponsors, and most importantly, a message to every African nation still pretending the fight for sovereignty wasn't already here. Burkina Faso wasn't waiting to be attacked anymore. It was hunting first. And for the first time in decades, Western analysts admitted, this we did not expect. The bodies were burned, the vehicles twisted wreckage. But what investigators found at the strike site shocked everyone, especially Traoré's high command. These weren't ragtag fighters. These were professionals. Their weapons were clean, their tactics tight, and their equipment foreign, expensive, precise. In the wreckage, US-manufactured assault rifles with biometric grips, French satellite radios still logged into encrypted networks, tactical maps printed in English, and marked with Burkinabe resource sites. Fingerprints pulled from surviving gear led to a bombshell discovery. Most of the fighters were Nigerian nationals, former special forces, some even recently discharged from elite units, but they weren't acting under any official Nigerian orders. They carried no state insignia, no passports, no dog tags. They were ghosts, hired shadows, and someone had paid them handsomely. Banking trails traced through satellite data pointed to offshore accounts registered in the Caribbean, funneled through shell corporations based in Abu Dhabi, London, and Paris. The deeper Burkinabe intelligence dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was coordinated, funded, greenlit. But who pulled the strings? That answer was darker. Intercepted voice memos from satellite phones revealed a key codename repeated over and over: Falcon Hand. It was familiar to Traoré's top intel officers, a phrase flagged in prior CIA-linked sabotage attempts across the Sahel, a call sign used when deniability was essential, when blood had to be spilled without fingerprints. Even more alarming, one of the dead mercenaries had a phone still intact. In it, a contact saved under a simple label, DC Handler. The implications were massive. This wasn't just a team of hired killers. This was a proxy war unit designed to destabilize Burkina Faso's rise before it could inspire a continent. Traoré called an emergency meeting of the AES Council, and in that meeting, he said 5 words that would shape the days ahead. If they send ghosts, we send thunder. The order to strike didn't come easily. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a soldier, but not a reckless one. He doesn't launch drones on rumors, but this time, the intelligence was crystal clear and chilling. 2 nights before the drone strike, Burkina Faso's Signals Intelligence Unit intercepted an encrypted call bouncing off 3 towers, one in Nigeria, one in Ghana, and one in Ouagadougou itself. That meant one thing. A mole was operating inside the capital. The call was brief, coded, but it ended with the phrase that set off every alarm. Operation Broken Spine begins in 72 hours. Within minutes, military cyber teams decrypted the associated data packet. Attached was a crude satellite image, a zoomed-in shot of the oil refinery under construction in Koudougou, the pride of Traoré's new economic independence campaign. Below it, coordinates. Above it, a timestamp. The mercenaries weren't coming. They were already inside the perimeter. Burkinabe special forces were mobilized silently. Niger's drone command, already monitoring the area, confirmed unusual movement near the southeastern corridor. Vehicles traveling without lights, stopping at obscure checkpoints, off-road routes bypassing standard border crossings. One image showed a man in full tactical gear, face uncovered, holding a map. He had a Nigerian military tattoo on his forearm, and a patch once worn by Western-trained peacekeeping forces. That was enough. At 3:44 a.m., Traoré called his war council. 5 officers, no civilians, 1 decision. He looked each of them in the eye and asked one question. If they reach the refinery, what happens? The response was solemn. We lose the project, we lose momentum, and we lose the people's trust. Traoré nodded once, then calmly issued the words that would define the night. Deploy the drone, terminate the threat. It wasn't a show of power, it wasn't revenge, it was preemptive survival. Because in the new age of warfare, you don't wait for the bullets to fly, you strike before your future burns. And with that, the sky opened. It wasn't American, it wasn't French, and it definitely wasn't bought through any Western supplier. The drone that struck the mercenary convoy in southeast Burkina Faso was something the world didn't see coming. It was a hybrid machine, North Korean design, Russian modified targeting, AES programmed software interface, its name inside military channels, Naieri 7, a nod to an ancient mossy warrior queen. Compact, radar stealth-coated and equipped with infrared thermal precision, the Naieri 7 could fly 800 kilometers without refuel, but this model had been upgraded for one purpose only: to end incursions before they start. Developed in secret under Burkina Faso's new Sovereign Defense Tech initiative, the Naieri 7 was built with direct cooperation from engineers in Pyongyang and tested discreetly in northern Mali with help from AES partners. Its firepower, 2 compact heat-seeking missiles and a custom-designed fragmentation payload that could obliterate armored vehicles without damaging nearby terrain, perfect for protecting infrastructure while eliminating hostiles. But it wasn't just the hardware that shocked Western analysts, it was how fast it was deployed. In under 12 minutes from command order to launch, target recognition using AI fed with live border data, 0 civilian casualties, 0 second chances. When satellite footage confirmed the strike's aftermath, analysts at AFRICOM reportedly said, "Whatever they used, we don't have anything that moves that clean out there." And suddenly, everything changed. Burkina Faso, a country once considered technologically inferior, had just demonstrated a sovereign strike capacity backed by non-Western tech alliances. It didn't just level the battlefield, it redrew the map. No more dependence on French drones, no more begging the US for surveillance imagery. Burkina Faso had its own eye in the sky, and it had just blinked, lethally. The message was loud and clear: if you walk into this land with weapons, you won't walk out. The strike was public, the explosion undeniable. Yet from Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, nothing. No condemnation, no press briefing, no request for clarification, just silence. Inside the Nigerian State House, however, it was chaos. President Bola Tinubu's national security team was blindsided. Sources leaked that intelligence chiefs were scrambling to identify the dead men, but couldn't, because most of them had vanished from military records months ago. No official orders, no government acknowledgement. But biometric scans confirmed what was feared. These were former Nigerian elite soldiers, now operating as off-the-books mercenaries. Worse yet, preliminary internal reports suggested that several of them had recently trained in a foreign-run facility in Senegal, one known to host private security contractors with Western funding connections. So why didn't Nigeria speak up? Because the truth was far too dangerous. If Abuja admitted these men were theirs, they'd risk triggering a diplomatic firestorm with Burkina Faso and its AES allies. If they denied knowledge, they'd still have to explain why Nigerian-trained men were on a covert sabotage mission inside another sovereign nation. Caught between exposure and humiliation, the Tinubu administration chose silence, hoping the world would move on. But the world didn't. African media exploded. Nigerian and Malian outlets asked the question openly: was Nigeria trying to destabilize Traoré under foreign pressure? Burkinabe TV ran 24/7 coverage of the drone strike aftermath. Interviews with locals, analysis of intercepted mercenary gear, and repeated footage of Traoré's now viral quote, "Those who send killers into our home will receive no invitation, only fire." On the streets of Lagos and Abuja, Nigerians were split. Some denounced the mercenaries and called for a full investigation. Others warned that Western influence is turning our soldiers into pawns. But the most haunting rumor came from within Nigeria's own military. A leaked voice note from an officer whispered, "They knew. They just didn't think Traoré would respond." He did. And now, the silence from Abuja speaks louder than any official statement ever could. As the dust settled over the drone strike zone, another story began to surface, one far more dangerous than a border skirmish. Because inside the remains of the mercenary convoy, investigators discovered something chilling. A tactical operations binder, water-damaged, charred, but legible enough to raise alarms. Inside, satellite images annotated in French, tactical formations drawn to NATO specifications, GPS-marked oil and gold infrastructure points in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and stamped across the top, foreign asset liaison, priority objective. Traoré's intelligence unit immediately flagged the symbols. They matched identifiers from previous French military planning templates, last seen during the height of Operation Barkhane. But the real bombshell, the binder's communication protocol logs, each message packet routed through a server cluster in Virginia, Langley, Virginia, the heart of CIA operations. Traoré called an emergency session of the AES Security Council. Inside the war room, generals reviewed every intercepted message, every signal burst, every time-stamped relay. The conclusion: this wasn't just Nigeria, this was a coordinated proxy operation. And the backers weren't wearing uniforms. They were sitting in Washington and Paris, signing off on plans designed to make Burkina Faso implode from within. Why? Because Traoré had done the unthinkable. Nationalized oil, expelled French troops, refused IMF debt, and declared Africa no longer open for exploitation. To Western powers, that wasn't sovereignty, that was rebellion. And the only way to stop rebellion is to create chaos. The CIA, long accused of stirring coups across Africa, remained silent. France's foreign ministry denied everything, but couldn't explain why a French-manufactured SAT radio system was found on a dead mercenary at the site. AES leaders were done talking. In Niamey, Bamako, and Conakry, defense chiefs began coordinating a new protocol, AES Zero Compromise, a zero-tolerance strategy against any foreign-backed sabotage network. And as for Traoré, he stood before the cameras once again and said, "If you send agents in the shadows, don't be surprised when we send light to burn the dark." The drone strike was explosive, the evidence of foreign sabotage, chilling. But what happened next? That wasn't orchestrated by governments or generals. It came from the streets, from Lagos to Bamako, from Dakar to Johannesburg. Africa stood up. In Ouagadougou, thousands gathered outside the National Assembly, waving Burkinabe and AES flags. They weren't just protesting, they were celebrating. Traoré struck first. "Finally," shouted one man with tears in his eyes. Young women painted war paint across their cheeks, chanting, "Burkina is awake. Who's next?" In Mali, students printed leaflets with satellite images of the drone strike aftermath. At the top, in bold letters, "Don't mess with sovereignty." In Nigeria, the origin of the mercenaries, the reaction was different, but no less powerful. Some were angry. They felt betrayed by the silent complicity of their leaders, but most were just heartbroken that their own brothers had been used as pawns by foreign interests. One viral tweet from a Nigerian activist read, "They didn't die for Nigeria, they died for someone else's oil money." Across Africa, social media exploded with solidarity. Trending hashtags, Traoré the Defender, Africa is waking up, or sovereignty or death, and memes, thousands of them. Traoré holding a joystick captioned, "Press X to eliminate invaders." A map of Africa with drone targets marked "No fly for colonizers." Clips of the explosion edited with Afrobeat and anti-colonial slogans. Artists began painting murals of the strike. Poets recited verses in marketplaces. "We have buried fear, now we bury trespassers." And then came the student marches. In Ghana, in Kenya, in the DRC. One placard read, "Traoré did in one night what 50 years of diplomacy could not." For the first time in decades, it wasn't a Western leader dominating headlines in Africa. It was a Burkinabe soldier, young, fearless, and unapologetically African. This wasn't just geopolitical, it was generational, because for every corrupt official in a palace, there were 1 million young Africans in the street, ready to fight for what's theirs. And with one drone strike, Traoré had lit the fire. The pressure came fast. In Washington, White House officials released a carefully worded statement. "We urge restraint and call for an immediate de-escalation of hostilities in the Sahel." In Paris, the French foreign minister declared, Burkina Faso's actions threaten regional stability and violate international norms. The EU convened an emergency session. NATO intelligence networks buzzed. BBC and CNN rolled out back-to-back specials. Is Traoré leading Africa into chaos? But in Ouagadougou, there was no panic, only laughter. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, sitting with his top advisors in a secure command bunker beneath the presidential complex, reviewed the Western responses in silence. Then he leaned back and said, "They talk of order, but what they fear is control slipping from their hands." He wasn't wrong. The West had played the same card for decades. Label defiant African leaders as dangerous, paint them as unstable, call for restraint, while funding the very chaos they claim to oppose. But this time, the old playbook wasn't working. Burkina Faso didn't flinch. AES didn't condemn the strike. And the people, they cheered louder. Traoré took it a step further. He held a press conference, live, no teleprompters, no scripted lines, just fire. To those urging restraint, we see through your mask. You armed the mercenaries, you trained the saboteurs, you triggered this. And now that we've responded, you call us dangerous. He paused. Let the silence burn. Burkina Faso is not your puppet. Our borders are not open to conquest. If protecting our land makes you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working. The clip went viral. Even Western citizens, tired of endless hypocrisy, began reposting his words with captions like, "This is what real leadership looks like." Think tanks warned of a new Cold War in Africa. Defense analysts called for immediate countermeasures. But deep down, the West understood the truth. This wasn't about a drone strike. It was about losing control and the fear that others might follow. Traoré had crossed a line, not the West's line, Africa's line, the line that separates obedience from freedom. The drone strike may have killed the mercenaries, but the war had just begun. Intelligence reports warned of more incursions being planned. Encrypted chatter from foreign servers hinted at secondary assets waiting in the shadows. Traoré didn't wait for a second wave. He called an emergency session of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, the trio that had already defied ECOWAS, expelled France, and redefined African unity. What followed was unprecedented. The immediate activation of a joint military response protocol, Operation Iron Shield. Not a drill, not a simulation, a full, real-time, cross-border defensive doctrine. Within hours, AES satellites were redirected to monitor high-risk zones. Encrypted channels were opened between Ouagadougou, Niamey, and Bamako for 24/7 battlefield coordination. Joint air patrols began rotating. Burkinabe drones, Malian helicopters, and Nigerian recon jets scanning every inch of the Sahel for threats. At ground level, it was even bolder. Mali deployed elite counter-infiltration units to the Burkina border. Niger sent mobile radar stations and long-range anti-air systems. Burkina Faso reinforced every strategic oil, gold, and lithium site with AES commandos. Command centers were established in each capital, each linked by real-time intel, satellite feeds, and shared drone swarms. If one nation was hit, all three would respond in under 5 minutes. This wasn't just defense, it was deterrence. A declaration to every foreign actor planning sabotage. If you strike one of us, you face all of us. And this time, we shoot back. Even more shocking? Guinea, Chad, and the Central African Republic sent military observers to AES headquarters, expressing interest in joining future versions of the Shield. The West scrambled. Pentagon officials called it a dangerous militarization. French analysts called it a rogue alliance. But on the ground, African citizens called it something else. The first real African army. Traoré, Goïta, and Chiani appeared in a joint broadcast. No medals, no suits, just uniforms, grit, and a single unified message. Africa is no longer defenseless. We are the shield, and we are ready. They thought it was a warning shot. They were wrong. The drone strike, the viral speech, the rise of Operation Iron Shield. None of it was an accident. It was the beginning of a doctrine, a new African rule. Step onto our land with weapons, and you won't step off it. In the days that followed, satellite traffic intensified. US surveillance drones hovered at a distance. French intelligence teams shifted their attention deeper into AES territory, but they didn't dare move, because something had changed. The cost of intervention had gone up, way up. AES intelligence leaked one final memo, not to provoke war, but to end the guessing. A single sentence stamped in red across a classified communique. All unregistered military presence inside AES borders will be treated as hostile and neutralized without negotiation. No ambiguity, no bluff, just fire. Western think tanks scrambled to respond. Rand Corporation called it a seismic shift in Africa's defense posture. The CIA flagged Traoré as a Tier 1 destabilizer. France quietly evacuated several private security consultants from Ouagadougou and Niamey. They understood. The red line had been drawn, not in ink, but in blood and steel, and crossing it now would mean open confrontation, not with a single state, but with a hardened alliance born from betrayal, war, and resistance. Meanwhile, African youth were electrified. Graffiti on city walls read, "Don't tread, don't test, don't try." Students at the University of Bamako held seminars titled "The Day Africa Fought Back," and across AES territory, school children were taught a new acronym, IS, Iron Shield. It's not just protection, it's identity. As for Traoré, he stood atop a newly secured oil platform in Koudougou, surrounded by engineers and soldiers. When asked by a reporter if he feared retaliation, he replied, "Fear is for those who borrow power. We built ours." Then he turned away, eyes fixed on the horizon. Because for the first time in a century, Africa wasn't waiting for orders. It was drawing the line and daring the world to cross it.
Your Majesties, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for returning. Trust you and yours are well, and you're loving yourself and others like always. Many thanks to all of you for the support you give to the channel. Thank you so much to our channel members, to our anonymous supporters, to all of you, my esteemed subscribers. You're loved, celebrated, and of course, appreciated. So today, we will have this discussion that is going on viral right now. And I'm talking about the response that Chad gave to Donald Trump pertaining this travel ban. Of course, we are aware, it's out there on all news outlets. It's not just Chad that was restricted. There are other African countries and other nations around the world that was restricted. Of course, the American government gave their reasons to why they have to restrict these regions from trespassing their territory. And these regions have, replies to give to this government. Some are okay with it, but there is a response that the government of Chad gave, and that is what is making Africans at this point so happy. And why do you think Africans are happy? Because we are living in a time where we cannot speak for ourselves. This is what we've been waiting for, that time where African countries can say, no, you can't just push me here and I go. You can't just push me there and I go. I would you understand what I'm saying. So it's said that the US banned Chad, but Chad did the unthinkable. And what is that unthinkable? That is what I'm bringing to you here, Your Majesties. Now, there is something that was going on underneath. Something was cooking. Something was cooking. There was a rumor that circulated within that the reason why the United States government is angry with Chad and had to, restrict Chad, it's not because of the reason they gave. Most of the time they just give some of these, things just to cover up the main situation. So that the main situation is that They wanted to use Chad to spy on the Sahel, but the Chadian government refused, that they're not going to be party to that. And you know, Idris Deby, the president of the Chadian people, he at this point is going the same way that the Sahel leaders are going. No one is perfect, but he's doing his best for his nation. Okay, and of course, he's not just going to jump into whatever that the U.S. government had instructed him to do. So that is a reason that because he had said he's not going to be a spy for the United States government against his own brothers and sisters in the Sahel. Things escalated to this. And if you look at the situations critically, there are iotas of truth. Because to say that Idris Deby stood on his ground and made a decision he made, is like he understands. I know the reason why you are restricting me and my people, okay? But I'm not just going to fall for that. No matter what you do, I will stand by my people. No matter what you do, I will stand by Ibrahim Traore. I will stand by Assimi Goita. I will stand by Abdurrahmani Chiani, because these are my brothers and sisters. I keep telling you here that before anything else, we were Africans first. We were brothers and sisters first. And to see that Idris Deby put the interest of his continent first before any personal interest. Who knows what they have promised Idris Deby? Who knows what they have said, okay, we're going to give to you, or do this for us, and this is a reward. Who knows what they have enticed him with, and he refused. So there is something going on. The way they are dragging themselves, something definitely is happening. He decided to close all United States Army bases, and I don't even know why there are United States bases in Chad at this point up until this time. I don't know how they still, meander their way to still remain in that region. And also, the French base was also kicked out. And there was something he wrote on his social media handle. He said, I have instructed the government to act in accordance with the principles of reciprocity and suspend the granting of visas to citizens of the United States of America. This is exactly what is being done to his own citizens. And why should he not retaliate? It's just normal. At this point, this is a season of do me, I do you. If you play fair with me, I'm going to play fair with you. Now, why do you think the Sahel nations cut off from the West? Because Ibrahim Traore keep telling us that these people are so wicked that they do not know how to play fair games. So you don't play fair games, we're not going to work with you, okay? And he went further to say that Chad has neither planes to offer nor billions of dollars to give, but Chad has its dignity and pride. Oh my goodness, this is what got everybody out there. Africans are like, we are with you, we support you, okay? To hell with Donald Trump and whatever ban he's giving, all right? And I won't blame Donald anyway. Let's listen to this before we continue.
International gist now. The U.S. government restricted visas from 12 countries, including Chad, Iran, Afghanistan, and Haiti, citing inadequate security screening measures and a lack of cooperation in the deportation processes. The policy was effective from June 3rd and it sparked criticism across Africa. Now, the president of Chad, Mahamat Idris Deby, has now responded by suspending the issuance of visas to American citizens in response to the United States' recent decision to include the Central African nation in its expanded travel ban. The announcement was made by the president, who said, and I quote, Chad has no planes to offer, no billions of dollars to give, but Chad has its dignity and pride. As diplomatic tensions rise, it remains unclear how long Chad's retaliatory visa suspension will remain in effect, or whether other African countries will follow suit. Let's hear what social media tweets had to say about this situation. Dama Kalume said, thank you. These are the African countries we want. It will never be the end of the world just because Trump said so. Viva Chad. The second, let's get another tweet. Kibochi said, a silly move. Sometimes retaliation is not necessary. I think it lasts. And Koriu said, finally, the US slaps a visa ban on Chad, but still expects foreign engineers and mining consultants to roam freely on African soil. Not anymore. This isn't 1995. It's tit for tat now. You ban our people, we lock your business gates. Well, Emmanuel, well, some people are, I mean, what do you have to say about what the Chadian president has done?
Your Majesties, that was it. And what I was saying initially was that why do you think that you need to travel out of the continent to make it better, to make it big, to succeed? Why do you think so? When these people, to succeed, they had to come to learn from your ancestors. And then at this point, you are disgracing your ancestors, running to them, and they are kicking you back. If you've been with me here for some time now, it wasn't long before this whole thing started. Like I keep telling you, I don't see visions, but I'm not a seer rather. But when you look into situations and you look back into history, you understand that nothing good is coming from this set of people for you as melanated, as African. Nothing from the past up until this time. Your Majesties, we have been the one that good come from us to the world. It's just that they keep taking advantage of us. I told you that there was a time that it became so rampant on the internet. Everybody is telling you how to relocate. Everybody, every country in the continent has someone who they have paid to entice people to leave their countries. Okay, how to relocate from Ghana, how to relocate from Nigeria, how to relocate from Namibia to the United States, to Canada, to wherever you. Everywhere you see how to relocate. A lot of people were struggling to see that they go away. Oh, Africa is now a hellhole. Let us leave. And I was asking you all a question at that time. If we leave our nations claiming things are hard, things are difficult, you leave your nation. Just imagine everybody leave Africa to all these countries. Who is going to remain to take care of that which we own? No. I was talking about here. Some people are like, oh, you're bad. You don't want people to go to a place to go and, make ends meet. Oh, because you're living comfortable, you think everybody's living the same. Oh, what's of you? What? A lot of people said what they want to say. It's not even up to a year. The kicking back have started. The rejection have started. These were the same people that entice you into running to them. And even when you run to them, what do you get in return? Your Majesties. And of course, it is the truth that Africa is becoming something else. It's so difficult. And not just Africa, the whole world at this point is shaking. Oh, Africa is poor, Africa is this, Africa is that. And I had a question I was asking. I keep asking those questions. During those time when I was making those videos, I asked you all. If you feel that Africa is now in a particular state, or maybe a state that is not redeemable, who is responsible for Africa in this particular state that Africa is in? We don't think. The same people who entice you to come to them, oh, we're going to give you jobs, oh, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that. The same people are the ones who are the cause of the problems, the downfall of the continent of Africa. How can the same people who cause your pain give you joy? No, we don't see these things as they are. We're interested in, what we eat today. What about tomorrow? What are we building for tomorrow? And this is exactly why I keep telling you, there was a time I said Black people need to learn something from the white people. And a lot of you were angry. Why should we learn something from white people? They do not think of today alone. They think of their races in the future. And so they work towards the future. Even if it means them sacrificing their lives, as far as it's going to help their race, they are ready to go all in. But the Black man is just okay with the enjoyment of today. Acquire the money, spend it on, things that are not so important. Show the world that you have money, you're rich. It is quite unfortunate, Your Majesties. So I'm not digressing, it's still within the discussion, okay? To see that we have leaders like this is the joy that we have. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. And that's why I tell you that when I talk about the Sahel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, it brightens my day, even when I'm angry and I hear about the Sahel. I'm just so happy. And the joy increased to see that the leaders of other nations are also beginning to take a step forward. They are challenged by these three wise men in the Sahel to do something, to make a change. And that is the joy for me. And I believe it's the joy for every well-meaning, African out there, or those of African descent out there. What do you think, Your Majesty? Do you think that, like the other commenter, do you think that it was a bad idea, or it is a bad idea that the government had to, go head on with the United States government? Do you think so? Do you know a lot of Africans are so, they are so in awe. I don't know if it's fear or it's love or it's just, I don't know. There is there's this way they see these world powers as word, whenever you talk about United States government, you talk about the French government, you talk about the United Kingdom, you talk about these people, the collective West, the leaders. A lot of Africans begin to see them as gods and goddesses that can do the unthinkable, that have eyes everywhere. They begin to fear them. So the moment an African leader begin to, go head on with these people, a lot of Africans begin to say, oh, be careful. It's not all the time. Then it is when. If it is not all the time, you retaliate. Then when do we retaliate as Africans? Because we've not been retaliating all this while. And this is the time where I'm saying, okay, no, enough is enough. We should wake up. And we still have Africans who feel like the decision of this leader is bad. So, Your Majesties, what do you think about the decisions that Idris Deby made? Do you think it's for the good of the Chadian people, or you think is going to be detrimental in the future? I feel that that's the right thing to do. Like he said, they're a sovereign nation, and he is the leader. They might not have everything, but they have their dignity. And Donald Trump should respect that dignity of theirs, Your Majesties. And to me, I keep telling you, it is, I don't know, you might say I'm bad, I'm wicked, but I'm just so happy that everybody is being kicked back right now. Everybody is being prohibited right now. Remain in your nation, build your nation. Who are you running away? Who is coming to do it for you? Nobody. Do you want your inheritance to be in ruins? That's a question that we need to have in our hearts always whenever we think of, leaving the continents to other places and building other people's nations and abandoning our own. I'm going to see you in my next one, Your Majesties. Until then, love yourself, love others.
Viewers from around the world today, and thank you for engaging again with us on this show. Today we'll be talking about Africa. I've done a couple of videos on Africa, but what we're discussing today is very different from what I have done in the past. It's going to be an interesting discussion, so do not go away. We'll be talking about our good friend, General Langley. And later on, I'm going to explain why I call him our good friend. But the news right now is that General Langley is no longer going to be the head of Africa. So whether he's replaced or whether he's been sacked, or whether he resigned. That is what we do not know.
Now, the bootlicking, buck dancing, shoe shiner, the Boule Greek freak, General Langley, after humiliating himself all over the world with black people for disrespecting our dear brother, Captain Torre, now he's been sacked and he's been replaced. They're not even talking about it, but I seen his brother find the information. I had to bring that. We have to look deeper into it, but the humiliation for these coons is oh so glorious.
But what we know is that President Trump has nominated another officer to take charge of Africa. And so to put flesh to our story today, I want to read a story that is published by Fox News on the 4th of June. It's titled, "Trump Nominates Seasoned Military Leaders to Head Vital Global Commands." And the story says decorated officers with extensive operational experience selected to head critical U.S. military commands in Florida and Germany. Of course, the command in Germany is AFRICOM. Everybody knows that Africa, the AFRICOM command, the headquarters is based in Germany, even though it's supposed to oversee Africa. Fox News says the president also nominated Air Force Lieutenant General Dagwin R.M. Anderson to be promoted to general and assigned as commander of AFRICOM in Stuttgart, Germany. So this gentleman officer, Lieutenant General Dagwin R.M. Anderson, is going to take over from our dear friend, General Langley. Fox News further states, and I quote, it says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced Wednesday that President Donald Trump had nominated 2 high-ranking military officials to lead the U.S. Central Command, the CENTCOM, and U.S. African Command, AFRICOM. And according to a document that I found, which was published on the webpage of Air and Space Forces magazine, it says that this gentleman officer, Lieutenant General Dagwin Anderson, he will be the first airman to lead AFRICOM. That publication states further, it says Anderson is no stranger to the continent or to joint commands, having led United States Special Operations Command's Africa branch from 2019 to 2021. So that gentleman is very well known within the continent of Africa. Now let's go back to General Langley, because this show is about him. And I am convinced that not a few Africans will be relieved to see General Langley shown the gate. Because this man, this General Langley, a few weeks ago or a few months ago, he sparked an uproar after criticizing Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. Now, let me explain why I called him my friend or our friend in my previous video. Because after I used that term, my friend, to describe him, some of my viewers, they attacked me in the comments section. They said, oh, General Langley is not our friend. Why do you have to call him our friend? I want to explain that I use the word friend, the description friend, the adjective friend. It was used by way of sarcasm. And that means a verbal expression that is meant to express an irony and to convey the opposite meaning of what is actually spoken. You don't expect me to come on YouTube and begin to say that that gentleman is a foe. Let me not use the word enemy. Yeah, because there are certain things we shouldn't be saying here on YouTube. You all know that. Yes. And so General Langley is probably in the last days of his assignment. Just a few days ago, he granted an interview to he granted, and that was published on the webpage of the U.S. Department of Defense. That interview is titled "African Strategy Focuses on Burden Sharing, Protecting the U.S. Homeland. It was published on the 5th of June 2025. And in that interview, General Langley outlined the priorities of U.S. Africa Command. And according to him, these priorities include: 1, counter-terrorism. In particular, he talked about tackling terrorists who have a propensity, I'm using his word, terrorists who have a propensity to attack the U.S. homeland. So when I read that, I just began to think again, am I reading right? Or there's something wrong with my interpretation? So, I mean, how does Langley say that terrorists would attack the U.S. homeland from Africa? How is that possible? Are they going to launch ballistic missiles? And the missiles that are capable of reaching the U.S. within a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds? I don't understand. Langley also stated that the second priority of AFRICOM is countering China's quote-unquote military encroachment on the continent of Africa. Yes, you heard that. Chinese military encroachment on the continent of Africa. And I begin to ask myself again, how? The Chinese are busy constructing roads. They're not building drone bases. They're not setting up military infrastructure on the continent. The Chinese are busy constructing roads, constructing bridges, constructing airports, constructing seaports, building railway lines, building stadia, putting in place infrastructure that Africa needs to compete globally. That's what the Chinese are doing. So we're not going to let anyone confuse us with propaganda. Langley further stated in the last days of his assignment that while the security and stability mission will be African-led, in other words, the security and stability mission of AFRICOM will be Africa-led and to a degree enabled by the US. He said, quote unquote, we need to do a sharing of burden in providing stability and security on the African continent with our African partners as well as allies. So the third priority that Langley mentioned is burden sharing. Let us try to decode the meaning of burden sharing. What it means is that helpless nations of Africa should make adequate provision in their national budgets to cater for security activities of AFRICOM on the African continent. He's saying, therefore, by extension, that the United States will not be largely responsible. It's the burden, according to him, is going to be shared. And so the picture is being painted that it is Africa that needs AFRICOM more than the US. And so in reality, what burden sharing means is that nations that are grappling with poverty, food shortages, inflation, indebtedness to IMF and to World Bank and other multilateral agencies, nations that are deficient in infrastructure, nations that are struggling to compete, they must now find that extra dollar that is needed for security. It's almost the same as what President Trump is demanding from NATO members, especially here in Western Europe. And he's now demanding that the substantial share of their national budget be devoted to NATO and to defense purposes. And so there are so many reasons why Africans will be delighted to see this gentleman go. General Langley was never listening to what Africans were saying. He only wanted Africans to hear what he was saying. So to that extent, his departure is good news. And I want to state on this channel that it's important for the US to adopt a more partnership-based approach rather than being perceived as being militarily dominant or being neocolonial or being imperialistic. That's a better way to deal with our people or to engage with our people. And when I'm talking about partnership, I'm talking about 50-50 partnership. There is not going to be a dominant partner, and there's not going to be a junior partner. Furthermore, Africans will be delighted to see General Langley shown the gate, because there is zero evidence to show that under him, AFRICOM did anything for the benefit of the local populations of Africa. What we saw under General Langley was that AFRICOM was more of a platform for the US to increase its military footprints in Africa without any form of benefit whatsoever for the local populations. And what we saw again was that terrorist incidents were on the increase. They did not abate at all. Yes, that's the truth. And like we mentioned earlier, AFRICOM's operations under General Langley were very controversial. Langley himself did not help matters when he openly attacked Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso when he appeared before this United States Senate committee. He told the US Senate committee that Traore was using Burkina Faso's gold for his own personal protection. That was indeed very laughable, because it means that General Langley didn't even know what was going on in Burkina Faso. And Africans know the progress that Burkina Faso has made within the last 2 years under Ibrahim Traore. And so as we close our show today, Africans must understand the basic law of diplomacy, that a change in command in AFRICOM does not mean a change of US interests. In international relations, there are permanent interests. AFRICOM was not set up to serve African interests, but US interests. And the interests of the US on the continent are not the same as the priorities of our people. It means, therefore, that our people must remain eternally vigilant. I want to thank my viewers for watching, and if you have enjoyed our content, you found it useful, please consider to subscribe to this channel. Also, consider to like the work that we are doing here by pressing like on this video.
Again, it was all sparked by immigration and customs enforcement raids in the city on Friday. Those ICE raids then leading to protests breaking out across the downtown Los Angeles area. And those protests continuing right now, even at this time in Paramount. This is a look at the clash between protesters and federal agents in Paramount. People were yelling, people were chanting, several flashbang smoke grenades were thrown into the street. The LA County Sheriff's Office said it was on scene just to keep the peace, but said it was not getting involved with making arrests. The sheriff has called for peaceful protests only.
We will protect your right to peacefully protest, but we cannot and will not tolerate violence or destruction of property.
And the Department of Homeland Security is now responding to the unrest in Los Angeles. President Donald Trump's border czar Tom Homan says the National Guard will be deployed in Los Angeles tonight. He made those comments on Fox News. Now, the White House has released a statement saying, in part, quote, in the wake of this violence, California's reckless Democratic leaders have completely abdicated their responsibility to protect their citizens. That is why President Trump has signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 National National Guardsmen to address the lawlessness that has been allowed to fester. Governor Gavin Newsom has responded to that announcement tonight. In a statement, the governor says, quote, the federal government is moving to take over the California National Guard and deploy 2,000 soldiers. That move is purposefully inflammatory and will only escalate tensions. LA authorities are able to access law enforcement assistance at a moment's notice, and we're in close coordination with the city and county, and there's currently no unmet need. The governor went on to say the Guard has been admirably serving LA throughout recovery. This is the wrong mission and will erode public trust. Again, that quote.
Breaking news, a car goes up in flames right in front of Dale's Donuts as protests in Paramount get out of control and spill into Compton. And tensions escalate, officers in riot gear firing tear gas at protesters who are pushing back on immigration raids. Then people throwing stuff and banging on Border Patrol cars as they pass through crowds.
In the country now.
Meanwhile, another crowd tries to block a U.S. Marshal Service bus. Federal law enforcement officers use tear gas and flashbangs to clear away the crowd. Tonight, U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley says federal agents arrested over a dozen people who impeded agents. Let's get right to KCAL News reporter Zach Boetto live in Compton. Zach, what's happening? What are you seeing right now?
Hey, Gio, we're standing just off camera here. To our left, there are some masked people who have just bashed and tipped over this solar security camera station that was set up here at the Arco gas station across the street from where the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department deputies are stationed. Over here to the right, you can see those deputies. They have ride shields. They're standing strong at the intersection of Alondra and Atlantic. They're trying to hold there and make sure that the protesters don't go past that point. As you mentioned earlier, let's roll some video. There was a car that caught fire at the intersection here of Alondra and Atlantic, just right in the middle of the intersection where traffic was going back and forth and where authorities were trying to push protesters away from the action. We've seen fireworks. We've seen flags out here, people on dirt bikes, people on motorcycles. We've seen spinouts, burnouts, donuts, pretty much anything that you can think happens in a major protest. We're seeing right now here in Compton. We did speak with the Los Angeles County Sheriff as well as a protester about what's happening here in Los Angeles today. Here's what they had to say. Well, we'll get you that sound.
This is a United States of America. It's supposed to be for everybody. No one's better. No one's superior. We are the same. We bleed the same. We will die the same. We will all go under the earth the same.
All we're doing is trying to help our people from being separated from their families. That's all we're doing. That's all. Do you see anybody being violent right now, sir? No.
As the crowd has grown, it has become more violent. Individuals in the crowd that have been throwing objects at the federal agents, and we started to call in additional resources from around the county of Los Angeles.
Now, just within the last few minutes here, authorities have opened up traffic here at Alondra and Atlantic. So that's why you can see cars now going through the intersection where that charred car still sits. Also within the last few minutes, those protesters knocking over that security camera. It's now resting on the power line just here above our heads. So a lot of stuff still happening here, Geo, in Compton, and with the federal authorities deploying more backup. We are thinking that this is not the end of what's happening here in Compton this evening.
Zach, yeah, we're seeing the knocked over station there sitting on its side from SkyCal. Before we let you go, I know earlier when we first broke in around 5 o'clock, you made a mention of how there's a large number of people there, obviously, a lot of them with their phones out and other forms of video trying to just watch what's going on. Do you still get the sense that that's really sort of the energy level of folks around there right now? Because we've described it throughout the afternoon that this is an ebbs and flows, and we seem to be on a bit of a downswing right now, but we know that that can change at any moment.
Yeah, Gio, I would say about 90% of the protesters that are here have their phones out and are observing what's happening. There's another 10%, and the sheriff said maybe 300 to 400 protesters here. So maybe about 30 to 40 people who are causing a lot of the damage, who are responsible for tossing over this security camera station, who are doing the burnouts, who are lighting cars on fire, lighting fireworks, but still a very active scene. And like you said, it ebbs and flows here. We just saw, I would say, the deputies here, the number of Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies double within the last 15 minutes. So we're here. KCAL's on scene. We're watching. We're reporting. We're talking to protesters. We're talking to the sheriff. And as everything plays out here this evening, we'll be here to make sure our viewers know what's happening.
Absolutely. Zach Boetto, live in Compton. Zach, thank you. And breaking news, Governor Newsom says that President Trump is moving to deploy the California National Guard. The National Guard is controlled by the governor. But Governor Newsom says the federal government is moving to take over the California National Guard and deploy 2,000 soldiers. Newsom goes on to say that move is purposefully inflammatory and will only escalate tensions. And President Trump posting this on Truth Social saying, quote, if Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can't, then the federal government will step in and solve the problem. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved. Earlier, not far from the Compton scene in Paramount, protesters clashed with law enforcement, with protesters trying to block vehicles and throwing objects at cars. Officers using pepper spray and firing rubber bullets. Take a listen to this. And just before officers used tear gas and rubber bullets, protesters tried to block a U.S. Marshal bus from driving through the crowd. See the horn honking, the face-to-face between the bus and the protesters, not to mention the flashbangs going off in the background. And this is another moment captured on camera. Protesters going face-to-face with a law enforcement vehicle and throwing what looked to be milk and other objects at a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol vehicle. And over in Inglewood, citizen video shows someone being stuffed inside a Border Patrol car. A few people were outside of the car protesting law enforcement. It's unclear if this was part of a larger raid or who the person was being taken. We've reached out to federal officials but haven't heard back yet. Today's protests come after an hours-long demonstration in downtown LA yesterday. People crowded the federal building where detainees were taken following widespread immigration sweeps in LA. The protest got tense at times, with officers firing tear gas to clear the crowd. And that protest continued into the night, with crowds gathering in Chinatown, where federal agents appeared to be staging. Protesters confronted those agents as several flashbang grenades went off. Several of the armored vehicles were also vandalized with graffiti. And the leader of one of the nation's largest labor unions remains in federal custody. Service Workers Union President David Huerta is accused of interfering with the LA immigration raids. The U.S. attorney says Huerta was blocking an ICE detention van. The union says Huerta was injured during the arrest and had to be taken to the hospital. Huerta is expected in court on Monday. Today, California lawmakers say they are being denied entry into the downtown LA detention center where detained migrants are being held. Congressman Jimmy Gomez and other elected leaders say they should be allowed to visit any facility that's detaining migrants, but were told they weren't allowed in because of safety issues.
I've been to the Middle East, I've been to war zones, so I know what it's like to actually be in a situation that's a lot more dangerous than inside this building.
How many people are there? It is our job as members of Congress to have oversight.
We reached out to Border Patrol for more information about the facility, but have not heard back.
Disgusting.
In a warning from the FBI, the agency says protesters could be prosecuted for attacking officers or impeding on immigration operations. Let's take you back out live here from SkyCal in Compton. You see sheriff's deputies on the move, a couple with those non-lethals up, getting ready. Who's to say what they're about to do, but this is sort of the tense situation that we're continuing to monitor in Compton right now. A line of sheriff's deputies and multiple vehicles just behind them at the intersection there of Alondra and Atlantic. We'll keep an eye on that as the evening progresses.
You're looking at live pictures out of Paramount, California, where protesters have been clashing with police all day outside a Home Depot. It is still unconfirmed whether immigration officials were conducting an ICE raid, but several ICE vehicles have sustained damages and multiple protesters have now been arrested for an assault on a federal agent. This incident follows a night of riots in Los Angeles following multiple ICE raids in the city. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Concha, along with Lydia Hu, Alicia Acuna, and Guy Benson. The big story tonight. Tear gas has filled the air as protesters clashed with police last night in Los Angeles. At least 45 people were arrested last night, while DHS says that more than 118 illegals were apprehended this week. The protester tried to storm into an ICE facility last night after being fired upon by radical speakers at a rally. Listen.
Free them all! Free them all! Free them all! Because an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us! And Los Angeles does not back down for that kind of fight!
Continue fighting until we reconstruct every single institution from the ground up so that we can grant full amnesty for all immigrants. Demand full compensation for all of the victims of this criminal injustice system.
What's going to change this is organizing, and not just any type of organizing, militant organizing.
Incredibly, Mayor Karen Bass is still standing with the protesters, saying she's fighting for all Angelinos regardless of immigration status, and doubling down that LA is a city of migrants, leaving out the illegal part. But the people on the side, as Karen Bass, are threatening ICE agents, spray painting death to ICE on dumpsters. Gavin Newsom also weighing in on the riots and blamed them on, get this, President Trump, accusing him of tearing families apart. And this chaos has now spread to New York City today alone as protesters organized in Lower Manhattan. Joining us to break down everything in terms of these protests is Border Czar Tom Homan. Tom, how is ICE responding to these protests? And thanks for joining us tonight.
Look, we're going to continue doing our job. And yesterday we got 118 arrests. I was out here yesterday to kick off this operation. And what people aren't talking about is ICE served, several warrants yesterday. These were criminal warrants. This is a criminal investigation. And today we're continuing operations. They're not going to shut us down. We're out there right now doing operations. We're going to keep doing operations. We brought in more resources to push back the protesters, but I'll say it again, a serious warning. You can protest all you want. You got your First Amendment rights. But if you cross that line of impediment, or you're putting hands on officers or destroy property, you will be prosecuted. There's zero tolerance on crossing that lines, and that's what we're standing by. We're bringing more resources as we speak. We'll have more resources tonight. We're going to continue doing the job that American people voted Donald Trump in office to do, and we're not going to apologize for doing it.
Tom, it's Alicia Acuna. Again, thank you so much for being here. During the protest yesterday, a Los Angeles City Council member called for mobilization against ICE. Listen.
They know how quickly we mobilize. That's why they're changing tactics. Because community defense works and our resistance has slowed them down before. And if they're escalating their tactics, then so are we. When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
So, Tom, will the Trump administration take action against these public officials who are threatening ICE agents with resistance?
Absolutely. And I think Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice is looking at that. And, you know, like I said many times, these elected officials or these non-government organizations, they can't cross the line either. I mean, we got people like, you know, Hakeem Jeffries saying he's going to dox ICE employees, you know, ICE agents out there with masks on. They're wearing masks to protect themselves and their families because they've been doxxed, their families been doxxed, their life's been threatened, their families have been threatened. I know myself, I had over 1,000 protesters in my house. I expect that as the borders are, but these men and women are putting their lives online every day. They arrested a lot of bad people yesterday and today. They arrested child sex offenders. They arrested people convicted of robbery. They arrested public safety, not only significant public safety threats, but national security threats. They arrested gang members. We're making Los Angeles safer. And Mayor Bass ought to be thanking us for making her city safer. And the term migrant, as Joe Concha rightfully said earlier, they're illegal aliens. There are illegal aliens in this country, and we welcome. We're the most giving country in the world. But these are illegal aliens who committed a crime by crossing this border illegally, then yet committed another crime. Again, yesterday's about a criminal investigation into money laundering, tax evasion, and some of the funds going to cartels in Mexico and Colombia that fund their operations of sending narcotics to this country, killing American people. This is about enforcing the law. And again, we're not going to apologize for doing it. We're stepping up. She says they're going to mobilize. Well, guess what? We're already ahead of the game. We're already mobilizing. We're going to bring National Guard in tonight. We're going to continue doing our job. We're going to push back on these people, and we're going to enforce the law.
Tom, it's Lydia Hu, and I want to ask you a little bit more about these Democrat demands that ICE agents be unmasked. Some Democrats are saying that if they don't unmask, they're threatening to dox them. Listen to this.
I don't know of any police department that routinely wears masks. We know that there are other groups that routinely wear masks. NSC 131 routinely wears masks.
Sending masked men to snatch, kidnap, and disappear immigrants of all legal statuses across the country.
Every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified.
Tom, I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit. Explain to us more, help everyone understand the threat that our ICE agents are facing by just doing their job, why they need to wear these masks, and also what actions need to be taken against Democrats who are demanding that they be unmasked, and what would happen if they do dox them and at least publish their identities.
Look, it's incredible. We're at a place where the guys, the men and women who enforce law, they're the bad guys, and the ones who break the law are the victims. You kidding me? How come they didn't say anything about BLM? They're out there. They were a mask. How about the protesters, all the college campers that were protesting against Israel and the Jewish students? They're wearing masks. I didn't hear a word about that for these protesters wearing masks. But ICE agents are wearing masks for one reason, because the assault on ICE officers is up over 400%. The assault on ICE officers. They're being doxxed across the country. And their families are being attacked. Their families are being doxxed. Their families are being threatened. And I certainly understand it. I have a lot of death threats. I've been doxxed. My family's been doxxed. I understand it. But they're wearing masks for one reason only: protect themselves and their families. They're doing a dangerous job. This is already a dangerous job. They got to wear a gun. They got to wear a Kevlar vest every day because they're doing a dangerous job every day. While the rest of these people, like Hakeem Jeffries, are sleeping in his bed at night at 3 a.m., nice and comfortably and safe, there's men and women of ICE on the street doing surveillance on significant public safety threats. really bad characters and national security threats. They're taking it on every day. The men and women Border Patrol standing on a dirt trail every night, 3 a.m., taking on the bad guy. So this is another threat against ICE agents, and we're asking the Department of Justice to look at these statements and see if there's something we can do. When do you cross that line on threatening ICE officers? And here's the problem. You know, you got all these people now attacking ICE. You saw they're writing death to ICE agents. ICE agents been threatened, their families been threatened, and you got members of Congress. You got some judges out there that compare ICE to the KKK, ICE to the Nazis. You got city council people saying ICE are terrorists. They're feeding the hatred. And here's my concern. I've been doing this a long time. It's a matter of time before ICE takes a life or an ICE agent loses their life, because the rhetoric is at an all-time high and is being fed by people who should be more responsible, elected officials especially, who keep firing up this rhetoric. I'm telling you, it's coming. There's going to be a tragedy because they keep throwing gas on this flame.
Tom, it's Guy Benson. Good of you to be with us this evening. The U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi just announced yesterday that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, another now familiar name in this whole wider drama, has actually been brought back to the United States after being deported to El Salvador. Here she is detailing his alleged crimes.
Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. Thousands of illegal aliens were smuggled. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country.
And Tom, in spite of these details, some Democrats are still on the bandwagon here, it seems. Watch this.
The Trump administration and all his cronies who should apologize to the country for putting us through this unnecessary situation, and to Abrego Garcia for putting him through this situation.
Otherwise, he has a status which is withhold deportation.
Now they're trying to act like he's some kind of drug lord or, human trafficker.
So, Tom, I posted this image on X yesterday showing how some in the liberal media just insist on calling him the Maryland man or the Maryland father. There's a big exception there on your screen, which is Fox News. And as you just heard in that montage, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, the biggest cheerleader for this man in Congress, went on national television, if CNN qualifies, and said that the president of the United States should apologize to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. What's your reaction to that?
Van Hollen's an embarrassment to the halls of Congress. He went over and collared an MS-13 gang member, a designated terrorist, a wife beater, and a public safety threat. And as we continue to do the investigation, now he's a human trafficker who traffic not just guns and weapons, but people, trafficking of women and children. So he's going to pay, we're going to prosecute him. So we're bringing him back here to prosecute him. We're bringing him back here to put him in prison. Then when he's done in prison, guess what? He'll be deported immediately again. Did any of these people ever meet with Angel, mom and dad? Van Hollen had a young mother with 5 children murdered by an illegal alien. Did he ever meet with them? Did he ever meet with the victims, the hundreds of victims of illegal alien crime? No. He's an embarrassment to halls of Congress. He's an embarrassment to the position he holds. President Trump don't owe anybody an apology. President Trump in 7 weeks gave us the most secure border in the history of this nation. President Trump is arresting thousands of public safety threats in this country every day. President Trump is making this country safe again, one illegal alien criminal at a time. And like I said, despite what's going on in LA, I'm here now. We're continuing operations today. We're going to do this job every single day. We won't be stopped. President Trump is a game changer. I worked for 6 presidents starting around Reagan. When it comes to national security, border security, immigration enforcement, public safety, no one has done better than President Trump. His success is unprecedented, not only on the border, but in taking national security threats and illegal alien public safety threats out of this nation. I wake up every day proud to work for President Trump, and we're going to keep doing the job that he promised American people he would do, and American people voted for him to do. We're going to keep his promise to American people, no apologies.
And the numbers prove that, Tom. We see that.
Kofi, follow me.